Hey everyone, we hope everyone's doing as well as can be expected under the circumstances. We hope you're staying active, staying vocal, and staying safe. We're glad you're here. So let's talk about Little Women for a couple of hours, then we can all get back to surviving. And Little Women is the topic of the day. Before you jump into this episode, though, I wanted to mention something. Because this is serving as the second part of a discussion we started almost 3 years ago in episode 7, we kind of leaned into that. In this episode, we don't really talk much about Louisa May Alcott's book, and we don't spend a lot of time talking about the adaptations we covered in episode 7. If you've already heard it, cool. But if you don't know the book that well, we'd recommend giving it a listen first. It's not as polished as we hope we are now, and I'm still doing my NPR voice for a lot of it, but we stand by the opinions we stated in it. And hey, maybe it would be nice to take a trip to the before times for an hour and a half. One more thing to mention. We tweeted about it, but I forgot to bring it up here. Ariel and I were recently interviewed on another show. We talked to author Jason Henderson, who had us on an episode of his podcast, Castle of Horror, to be part of their Castle Talk interview series. It was a super fun conversation. Jason was so nice, and I'd recommend giving his show a listen. And as a quick PS, Jason, Katarina, we hope you enjoy today's episode. All right, last thing before we get started. In 2 weeks, the most amazing thing is happening. Ariel and I are talking about something we haven't looked at for the show before. That, in and of itself, is cause for celebration. We love Anne of Green Gables, we love Pride and Prejudice, we love Little Women, but we were jonesing for some new content. On Tuesday, July 14th, we're taking a look at a classic story of deception prepared 3 ways. First, 1964's Bedtime Story, starring David Niven and Marlon Brando. Then, the one you probably know, 1988's Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, starring Michael Caine and Steve Martin. And finally, 2019's The Hustle with Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson. The stakes are low on this one, and we're really excited about it. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections about today's episode that you'd like to hear on the show, remember to email adapterparishcast@gmail.com or tweet at us using the AdaptCast hashtag. If you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would share that with the world by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Show notes from this and all other episodes can be found at adapterparishcast.com. And with that, on with the show, Adapter Parish, Episode 70, Little Women Part 2. Hello and welcome to Adapter Parish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
And I'm Ariel Lipshaw, and today we are talking about Little Women again.
It is month 4 of the quarantine, which means that it's time for another look back at an old episode. This is the last one, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I don't think we have any more to do after this.
I think next week is going to be an actual new thing that we haven't done before.
I guess technically we could go back and look at more Christmas carols. I think there are some in existence that we didn't do, but I don't really want to watch a bunch of Christmas carols in July. Do you?
No, I don't want to do that.
Okay, let's not do that.
Let's do it at Christmas, though.
No.
At some point.
Let's not.
I want to.
Okay.
But not now. Not now. Let's do this.
Okay.
Let's do this. So first of all, as always, in this time, how's everybody doing?
Let's check
We
in.
hope you're staying active. We hope you're staying safe. We hope you're wearing a fucking mask. Because God damn it.
Yeah.
I didn't think this was the argument we were all going to be having right now. Who knows? Maybe by the time this episode comes out, we're recording about a week in advance. Maybe when this episode comes out, everyone's suddenly on board with wearing masks.
Maybe.
You don't really have anything to say to that, do you?
I mean,
do we want to get dark? I don't think we should get dark.
Let's not get dark. This is a place of joy.
Yeah, we love you all, and we hope you're all staying safe.
Yeah.
But we wanted to. Why? Of all the things we could go back and look at, what are some reasons why we wanted to go back and look at Little Women?
Didn't have to read the book again.
Well, there is that.
Many versions that we had not seen readily available. And also, since we did the other episode, at least one, if not two, new versions have actually come out.
Third verse, same as the first. We were not as thorough in our early days as we are now.
Yeah, I will say, of everything we've ever done, I've probably gotten the most people saying, what did you think of the new Little Women movie? Mm-hmm. Asking me, what did you think of it? I'm really interested to know what you thought of it. And my response was always, I have not seen it. It is in the theaters. I cannot go to a theater.
But as we are recording now, have you seen Greta Gerwig's Little Women?
Yes, I have seen it.
Are we going to talk about it right this second?
No.
No, we're going to talk about it in a bit. Do you mind if I kind of get out how we're going to talk about all these today?
No, go for it.
So just so everybody knows, we're going to talk about a bunch of them. This isn't going to be like a 2 or 3-parter. We're going to do this in one episode. We are going to talk about 10 different versions of Little Women. We are going to cover the ones that we covered in our first episode. I would invite everyone to listen to that first episode.
Yeah, we re-listened to it just to make sure we didn't say anything stupid, and it held up okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Like, obviously, craft, being what it is, and development of and all that kind of stuff. Like, we're better now than we used to be. But like, I stand by all the stuff I said at that point.
And also, we talked extensively about the book in that one, which we're probably not going to do today.
Yeah.
And we also talked a lot about our trip to Orchard House, which was much closer to the time of that recording than it is to now. So if you want to hear about that, you should listen to the other episode. But otherwise, dive right in.
So we're going to talk about 10 of them. What order are we going to talk about them in?
We did a pretty reasonable job ranking them essentially worst to best. We don't like to say worst on this show, but we say it a lot anyway.
Our least favorite to our most favorite. And I don't know, we talked about doing like some weird, like we did the Sherlock Holmes ranking and it was very mathematical and which, kind of befitting the subject.
Befitting, yeah.
But I feel like we kind of went with our gut. We went with our heart on this one, which I think also befits the subject of Little Women. So I guess we should probably get started because we don't have a minute to lose.
No.
We've got 10 to get through. And based on our tracker record with these things, this is either going to be a 4-hour episode or we're going to split it into like 4 different episodes.
Let's not do that.
So I feel like we should get started. Do you have anything else to say before we jump in?
No, let's go.
All right. So number 1. Well, I guess number 10.
Yeah, definitely 10 through. And this is a VH1 top 10 countdown.
Yeah. Number 10 on our list was one of the ones that came out since we recorded the first time.
And it's kind of an honorable mention anyway because it's not actually Little Women.
It is
Despite
Little
being
Women.
Called Little Women, it's not, though.
I don't know. It's one of those ones where like I saw some other adaptations that are like, here's a modern day adaptation where the March sisters try to save their house or something like that. And like, that's not Little Women. That's just you taking the names of the characters and putting them on a new story. This is the story of Little Women. Like all the things, Beth dies,
of a sort.
Laurie's there, and Amy marries him. Like it is Little Women. It just happens to be present day, and there's some questionable stuff in it.
Yeah,
we watched 2018's Little Women. They're all called Little Women, so it makes it easy.
Every single one.
This one was directed by Claire Niederpruem. It was written by Niederpruem and Kristen Schimmick. Oh geez. What do we talk about first? Do we just get it out of the way?
Okay, just one sentence to sum up. This is about the March sisters and their mother Marmee and their father, Mr. March. It is modern day.
Yep.
It is 4 sisters living in an unconventional family, all with the same names as the March sisters and similar types of pursuits. Beth has cancer.
Well, yeah. She has leukemia.
She has leukemia. And it's bad shit.
I think you're burying the lead on this one.
Okay, what's the lead?
If we were going to label all these with like one word, which version of Little Women is this one?
It's Christian.
Yes.
It's a Christian movie.
So this is part of the whole kind of modern, there's like a little modern kind of indie movie scene of unapologetic Christian movies.
God is not dead.
Yeah, God is not dead part 2.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. This is part of that whole scene.
And I just want to be clear. We're about to make fun of this movie.
In great detail. We
are not making fun of Christians. And we are not making fun of it by virtue of the fact that it is a Christian-themed movie from a Christian production company that produces Christian movies. We're going to make fun of it because it was very, very bad.
I'm going to make fun of it because of the production company that it's from.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just get this out of the way because I don't want to spend too much time on this one. The movie is wholesome to a fault. It's really, really saccharine. It wears its faith on its sleeve. And the thing that I don't appreciate it is because I know a little bit about, and I've learned a little bit about the people that distributed this movie and the kind of movies that they make. And the thing that I just find so funny about it is such a devout movie from people who are so focused on the chip they have on their shoulder about the way they are treated by people they feel as not being of their faith.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing about it to me is that, you know, we've learned a lot about the Alcotts,
Mm-hmm.
and we've learned that they were actually really, really progressive for their time.
Yes.
Were they Christian?
Not. I mean,
Well, yeah, they were.
They were like deists. I mean, they believed in a god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, if you look in Little Women, there's religious stuff in it.
Yeah,
there
for
is.
sure. Yes.
There absolutely is. But like, that was the time.
Right.
But the thing is, in the context of the time, they were ridiculously progressive.
Yeah.
And the thing that they turn the marches into in modern day is they turn them into kind of the opposite of a progressive family.
Mm-hmm.
They are absolutely the family values family.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't appreciate that.
No.
I thought it was a gross oversimplification, and it completely misses the point.
Yeah.
So I don't like that they took this story and turned it into something that they felt could build up their brand.
Yeah.
I was kind of offended by it. I said I was going to make fun of them. I guess I was just going to complain about them.
Yeah.
Sorry. I wanted to get that out of the way. You wanted to talk about the merits of the movie and whether it's actually like successful or not.
Yeah. I mean, it just seemed so disjointed with any kind of reality.
Yeah.
And any kind of realistic human behavior. So, okay, first of all, it jumps back and forth in time in a dizzying manner.
And jumping back and forth in time, that can't possibly work in a Little Women movie.
We'll talk about it.
Certainly not a good Little Women movie.
We'll talk about it later. And there's at least 3 sets of actors. There's at least 3 Amy's for sure.
Yeah.
And at least 2 of every other sister. Because there's like little kids, medium kids, and then grown-up Amy. So that was confusing. Usually we get a little indication like 12 years ago, 6 years ago, but sometimes we don't. So it was, first of all, confusing to watch. It always kind of blows my mind when we watch a movie that I am intimately familiar with the source material and also have seen 6 to 10 other versions of the same movie, and I still find it hard to follow the plot. I don't understand how that's even possible, and yet here we are. So like, just, I still don't understand who the character Freddie Bear is. I still don't know who he was supposed to be.
All right. Do you mind if I...
Go ahead.
Okay, so in this, the whole thing is like we meet Jo when she is, oh God, like I don't want to spend much time on this, but there's so much stuff that's in it that's batshit. So we meet Jo as an adult. She is almost 30,
Mm-hmm.
and she is auditioning to be a writer?
Yes. And for some reason in a college classroom with math on the blackboard in front of 3 people from different publishing houses, but at least one of them is also a professor at the college. And because she keeps calling Professor Bear, then she got mad because they hadn't heard enough of her novel to really judge it, even though that was the format that she had submitted it in.
I mean, really, the movie is giving us things that don't work the way reality works immediately.
Yeah.
It's like the number 1 of 50 things that don't work that way.
Yes. And then she gets really mad and knocks over a trash can to show her rage. But then we see her picking it up again because she's a nice person and also has grown
Yeah.
from when she would kick things over and not pick them up. We find out later. At this point, I wrote jumping timelines could not be more confusing. And then I wrote Jo is the worst.
Jo is the worst. And that's okay. Can I really quickly throw out one thing that I thought kind of worked in this one?
Yeah.
The actress who plays Beth. I thought she was actually pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was very Fault in Our Stars.
Very, 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 very. There were the shades of Shailene.
Shailene Woodley.
Yeah.
But it wasn't her. It was someone else.
But I thought she did a fine job.
Mm-hmm.
Leah Thompson as Marmee was Leah Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
I like Leah Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all I have to say.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the things that don't work. I've got 2 that I'll throw out
Okay.
there. Lucas Grabeel as Laurie.
At one point he says, "What about my music?" And I wrote down, "What, your dorm room guitar?" He is the guy in your dorm room who comes in with a guitar and says, "Does anyone want to hear Oasis's Wonderwall?" Is this guy?
No, he's not. Because that guy doesn't exist. No one ever asks, does anyone want to hear Oasis's Wonderwall? People just say, well, here's Wonderwall by Oasis.
That's right. I'm so sorry.
He produced this movie as well. This is a thing I see constantly that really pisses me off when someone produces a movie that they want to be in and they are unwilling to play a character with any faults. Would you say that Laurie, the character in the book, has faults?
Oh, yes, many faults.
Would you say that Laurie in this movie has any faults whatsoever?
He's very bad at guitar.
Well, but it's presented it's not presented that way. It's
No, I
presented
know.
as him being amazing.
Yes.
He has no faults whatsoever.
No
and
faults.
it's bullshit, and I hate it.
Yeah.
But Joe, Sarah Davenport as Joe. Who do you want to blame for this?
I don't know. I mean, the script is very bad.
Mm-hmm.
Her performance is over the top. So I would assume that's direction.
Yeah.
So between those two things, I mean, there's one point where she's like screaming at Amy, and this is before Amy does anything to her. She just wants to go. It's the scene where she wants to go out with Lori, and Amy says, "Can I go?" And Joe says no, and then Amy burns her writing in retaliation. And she is like up in Amy's face with Lori like standing there awkwardly, like screaming like, everyone hates you and no one wants to be around you and you're so annoying and you're the worst and you're terrible. And
you're like whispering right now because you don't want to wake up the baby in the other room, but she is screaming She's unhinged.
Like if someone was treating their sibling like that in front of you and you were the friend just standing there awkwardly, wouldn't you just be like, I'm gonna go? Like, this is really, really uncomfortable for me right now. And then Amy burns her book, which honestly,
this is the first one where we were rooting for her.
We were rooting for her. And then later in the movie, Amy says to Joe, like, almost like she's terrified of her. And this is like a child actor. She's like, I know you don't like me very much, but I really like look up to you and I respect you. And it broke my heart because Joe was so mean and awful to Amy for no apparent reason. Joe, okay, can I tell you who Joe reminds me of?
Who?
I don't know how niche a reference this is.
Don't let
for
that
our
stop
audience.
you. Don't let that stop you.
Joe in this movie is Jenny Schechter from The L Word. This is a character who is unhinged, treats people horribly, delusional about their own talent, and also somehow manages to achieve great success and personal satisfaction. It's a perfect comparison if you know the character. This is the first thing we have ever watched. Like, I'm pretty strong on like the author does not need to be associated with any adaptation made from their work. Like, it shouldn't really matter, especially when the author's been dead for hundreds of years. I literally wrote Louisa May Alcott is rolling in her grave. I have never had that feeling before about anything that we've watched. I've really never cared about the author's feelings at all. But this was an abomination. It was terrible.
Yep. Hated it. It felt like the longest movie we've ever watched for the show.
And there was so much yelling. Everyone was just shouting all the time.
Yeah.
It was uncomfortable to watch.
Can we please move on?
Yeah. Yes.
Oof. Number 9. Moving up. This one was slightly better in that we didn't hate it as much. In 1978, there was a TV miniseries starring TV's finest, Susan Day.
Meredith Baxter Burney.
Greer Garson, actually. Real movie star Greer Garson.
Mm-hmm.
This guy was on a show called Star Trek. His name was John Delancey. Do you know John Delancey from Star Trek?
Who else was on this from Star Trek?
William Shatner was in this of Star Trek.
Oh, man.
Okay. Why is this one higher up on the list?
It was more like the book Little Women. And it wasn't, I'll tell you what, it was fun bad. It wasn't offensively bad.
Yes.
The other Little Women was not fun to watch. This was super fun to watch. It was just not very good. The wigs were so bad.
Which is the worst wig in the whole thing.
When Joe cuts her hair.
It's really bad.
Well, actually, Joe's hair at the beginning is a really bad wig. And then when she cuts her hair off, I think it must be the same wig. I think they didn't have 2 wigs for Joe. So they just had to like maybe tuck the ends of the old wig up under the bottom. So she has like this weird helmet hair for a lot of the movie.
But it's just like combed straight back. The entire time. I'm making the universal hand gesture for combing straight back.
It's really strange. The other thing that we noticed in this movie is that they did try to place it in space and time. It is set in Concord, Massachusetts.
Where?
But filmed in California.
No, wait, where
no one knows how to pronounce Concord, Massachusetts.
I was going to say, this doesn't take place in Concord, Massachusetts.
It takes place in a fictional town called Concord.
This is a problem that happens a lot. Look, bad wigs and mispronouncing Concord are like, that is something that a lot of Little Women adaptations have.
Yes. It also had a really bad script.
Yeah.
It was not, I wrote down a couple of lines of dialogue that I just so awkward and clunky. Like, Lori comes to the house and Beth is sick and they don't want to let him in. And Joe says to him, Lori, wait, stop. Have you had scarlet fever? And he goes, yes. Yeah. Beth has that. And at one point she says, I'll have you erase, Lori. It's just, it's someone trying to write like, quote, old fashioned dialogue, but not succeeding very well. It also had a lot of macrame because it was the 70s.
I'm so excited to see where you're going with all of these. What else does it have?
They had to change the name of a character.
Oh, which one?
Well, Marmie's friend in New York who runs the boarding house that Joe goes to visit. They start talking about her, and Joe says, Marmie, what about your friend, Mrs. Kirka? And I was like, Mrs. Kirka? Like, what is the name? That's certainly not the name from the book. So what is the name? Oh, it's Mrs. Kirk. They couldn't call her Mrs. Kirk because Captain Kirk is in this TV show.
This is a wild assumption. This is wild speculation at this point, but I love it.
I mean, it's obvious. It's obviously the case. And also, Mrs. Kirk or Kirka was the only actor in the movie who knew how to say Concord. She's like, this is Joe March from Concord, Massachusetts. And we both freaked out.
It was the most entertaining thing about the whole thing. All right.
And then we went on this whole run because John Delancey, who plays Q in Star Trek, is in it. We were like, sir, I protest. I am not a little woman.
I just kept expecting Patrick Stewart to walk in on any scene dressed up in old-timey clothes. Just going like, Q, this is ridiculous. Get me back to my ship.
What is this nonsense? I'm not playing around, Q.
Okay. What else doesn't work? There's lots of... The exposition is pretty terrible in this movie, and I feel like this is one of the weird ones where Mr. Lawrence is elevated. Like, he's a main character in this.
He's everyone's confidant. All the girls want to talk to Mr. Lawrence.
It's super, super weird, and I don't know if that's a generational... I don't get it. I genuinely don't get it. I don't even know. Like, he's not some like amazing actor as far as I could tell. That's a thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We have another thing.
Yeah.
So we haven't talked about this yet in this episode, but we're going to keep referring back to it. We talked about it at great length in episode number 1 of Little Women. Let's talk about the ages of the actors playing these characters.
Yeah. We're not going to talk about the ages as much. We listened to the first episode and we went on about the ages for about half an hour.
Yeah. We're not going to throw out numbers or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's another tradition of Little Women adaptations that you're going to have actresses play these parts who are completely the wrong ages.
Mm-hmm.
Comically the wrong ages for these characters.
Yeah. Well, Amy's 25, playing 12. That was the worst one for me.
It like got a little bit better when she aged up a little bit.
Yeah, it was okay.
Like a little bit?
A little bit. I think Meredith Baxter Burney playing Meg was like 31, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. Susan Day, I don't know, in her mid-20s, presumably.
I had the biggest like revelation when we were watching this. Do you ever have something like this happen where like there is something you felt really strongly about when you were a kid, but you literally haven't thought about it in 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
I forgot until I was watching this 2 things. One, I watched the fuck out of the Partridge Family when I was a kid on Nick at Night or whatever.
Yeah.
How would we have watched the Partridge
Nick at
Family?
Night,
Yeah,
certainly.
That's one. B, I had the biggest crush on Susan Day that I completely forgot about.
Uh-huh.
It was so nostalgic to go back and watch Susan Day in something. She's so cute.
Yeah. Well, speaking of erotic energy, there was something that I wanted to talk about.
I'm so happy that we're talking about William Shatner. I wondered when he was going to come up.
So one of the things that I liked, one of the few things, is that because it's a miniseries, they had a little bit more time to do some of the scenes that aren't in every version. And I really like the stuff in the book after Meg is married and kind of what she goes through with kind of learning to be a wife and a mother and living with John and like getting along together and being, good at, budgeting and all that stuff. And there's this scene in the book where Meg goes shopping with her rich friend and gets kind of talked into buying this expensive fabric to make a dress. She spends like $50. And not even for the dress, just for the fabric. And it means that John can't have the winter coat that he really needed. And he's upset and she's upset and everyone's upset. And she apologizes and then she sells the fabric back to her friend, gets the money and gets John his coat. And in the book, there's this lovely little passage where, I'll just read it. Actually, I've pulled it up. Then Meg ordered home the greatcoat, and when John arrived, she put it on and asked him how he liked her new silk gown. One can imagine what answer he made, how he received his present, and that a blissful state of things ensued. John came home early, Meg gadded no more, and that greatcoat was put on in the morning by a very happy husband and taken off at night by a most devoted little wife. And then in the next sentence, we learn that Meg's pregnant, because it says, so the year rolled round, and at midsummer there came to Meg a new experience, the deepest and tenderest of a woman's life. So I guess in my mind, I always assumed that the incident with the coat and Meg getting pregnant were related, and that the whole thing was that she put on the coat kind of in a sexy way for John to take off.
Yeah, wearing this and only this.
Wearing this and only this.
Yeah.
And they do this scene in this movie. And she puts on the coat, and it could not be less attractive or more sexy. It is just this enormous coat.
Less attractive or less sexy?
Less attractive or less sexy. It is just this enormous coat on this very small woman, just standing there like completely swallowed in it. And he's like, great. Like it's funny. And I turned to you and I was like, I guess I always imagined that this scene was sexy. And then we had to have like a long conversation as to why I had always felt that way. Anyway, I guess it doesn't really matter.
I just think it says more about Ariel Lipshaw than it does about Louisa May Alcott, which is a totally valid thing to talk about when you're talking about literature.
Yeah.
Okay, we've gone on long enough. We've avoided the topic long enough. What is the biggest disagreement that you and I had about this?
William Shatner.
You thought his performance was, let me check my notes.
Not good.
And I thought his performance was actually pretty fantastic.
You thought it was transcendent.
I think William Shatner is, like, by all accounts, an incredibly good actor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what anybody says. He is a goddamn thespian. I think he is really good, and the only quibble you can have is that his accent is dog shit.
Mm-hmm.
It is truly, truly terrible. It's a thing to behold. the 20% of the time that he remembers to do it.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but I think he's genuinely wonderful in this movie. I think William Shatner is kind of perfect for this part. And it actually occurred to me, because Professor Bear has a beard, I don't think, have we ever seen William Shatner with a beard? Ever?
No, and I said to you, maybe he can't grow a beard.
I mean, he can't grow real hair, but that never stopped him from having hair in movies.
He's got a hairpiece. He could easily have a hairpiece beard.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah.
What?
A beard wig.
Do you want to fight me on this right now? Do you want to fight me on William Shatner being bad in this?
I really don't. I really, like, if you found joy in something, like, who am I to take that from you in this time?
If it wasn't for him, this would be the bottom one. I would fight hard for this being the worst one, because there were, other than him, I found nothing redeeming in it. I did not enjoy it, but I enjoyed him so much in it. But anyway, I feel like you had some things to say about kind of how the Bear Joe storyline kind of ends up.
Okay. It's just an example of how overwritten the dialogue is in this, like people trying to write oldie-timey dialogue and not doing a very good job. And also written by people who had, again, never been to Massachusetts. Because the scene at the end, right, where he says, they're under the umbrella, and he says, I have nothing to give you. My hands are empty. And Joe, I didn't write down word for word what she says, but she basically says, no, they could not be, because you see, I will put my hands in yours, and then we will face life together. Like, it was like,
is that the one where she says they're holding my heart?
They're holding my heart. It was like 2 sentences, and I'm screaming at the TV, 3 words, not empty now. Like, that's all you have to say. She basically, it was like she was explaining the metaphor of empty hands, and she did not need to explain it. All she had to say was not empty now.
This was an hour and 40 minutes worth of story told in 3 hours.
Yeah.
It was way longer than it needed to be.
And then this is just nitpicky, but then in that scene, it starts to snow, and they start screaming for joy. It's snowing! It's snowing like it's a miracle. Like if you were in LA and it started snowing, you would scream for joy. No one screams for joy. It's snowing in Massachusetts in the wintertime. It was like Christmas and it was snowing. Like, okay.
I have nothing else to say about this one. Don't watch it.
I mean, you should watch it.
If you love Star Trek, watch it. If on the Venn diagram of like people who like Little Women and people who love Star Trek, if you're in the crossover between those, watch it, because I think it's got something for you. If you were super into Family Ties and Partridge Family and Little Women, like, go ahead and watch it.
And the Brady Bunch, Eve Plum from the Brady Bunch.
Totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
But don't watch it. No, it's bad. We hated it. We kind of hated it, but it was a little fun to watch.
Yeah.
Now we're moving on to number 8 on our list. I think this is going to be the first controversial one, because this is one that some people like genuinely love. We did not love it. And also, we talked about it at great length in our previous episode, because this was 1949's movie of Little Women, directed by Mervyn LeRoy, written by Andrew Solt, Sarah Y. Mason, and Victor Heerman, and starring June Allison as Jo. The important thing to mention about this one, I think, is that it is a remake of the 1933 version of Little Women. Like, they use the same script.
It's the same script.
Again, if you go back to our first episode, if you've already listened to it before you listen to this one, we went on at length about that. So I don't think we need to at this point.
Yeah.
But basically, like, it kept all of the faults of the 33 movie, and I don't really think added much in the way of improvements. I think that's like the simple version of it.
Yeah. Well, the thing we found out when we did the previous episode was that June Allison was kind of, I guess, famous for playing characters far below her age. Like, after doing this, so when she did this Little Women, she was 32. And then, like, the next year, she played an even younger character in a different movie. She played, like, a 14-year-old, and we found that really creepy picture of her playing a young teenager.
It's upsetting.
Yeah. But the weirdest thing about this is the way that they cast the actresses, because clearly they had this pool of actresses that they wanted to use, which meant that they kind of had to shift the ages of the characters around, because Beth, the actress who plays Beth, is actually the youngest that we've seen. She's only 12. It's
Margaret O'Brien,
who's wonderful.
She's really good in it.
And really good. But it's just so funny that Margaret O'Brien is 12 and June Allison is 32, playing sisters who are supposed to be 2 years apart. It's really odd. And that last scene where, like, they have this conversation where Beth is dying, but she's just in the original version, it's the same scene, it's the same dialogue, but Beth is, like, lying in bed dying, and I guess maybe they didn't want to show a 12-year-old girl lying in bed dying, so she's just kind of standing there having this conversation with Jo about death, but looking fine and fully dressed in the attic, and it kind of makes it seem like she's a ghost.
Yeah. That was the reading of it, but then they kind of show you that that's not what's happening.
Yeah. And you posited that the entire thing is like kind of Jo's fever dream, that she's just seeing things the way that she wants to see them. Like, she's always seeing Beth as her little baby sister who never had a chance to grow up. And Professor Barron, this is extremely sexy, and you were like, well, that's how she sees him. He's sexy. She doesn't see him how he really is.
Well, no, I kind of posited that it was more about, like, an interpretation of how the audience, how readers of the book see the character.
Sure.
Like, yeah, if you read the description on the page, Professor Bear doesn't look like that, but I'm sure for a lot of people in their minds, they picture someone who looks like Rossano Brazzi.
Yeah.
Who is, like I said before, like, it adds very little in the way of improvements on the 1933 one. I would say Margaret O'Brien and Rossano Brazzi are, like, the two improvements.
Yeah.
I think his Professor Bear, it's wrong and different, but, like, he's super sexy and he's a goddamn good singer. So, like, it's fine and enjoyable. Bottom line, we know it's well respected. It just did not do it for us in so many different ways. And yeah, it's Little Women and we can recognize it as the story, but at the end of the day, it didn't connect with us at all. And if you want to hear us talk more at length about it, you can listen to episode 1.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on to number 7?
Yeah, let's do it.
Number 7 was another one that we covered in episode number 1. This was the anime TV special produced by Toei Animation from 1980 that then went on to spawn a TV show in Japan. We recently, when we did our Anne of Green Gables Part 2 episode, we had kind of a revelatory experience watching the anime TV show of Anne of Green Gables, which was thoughtful and beautiful and relaxing and interesting and just really loving as an adaptation. This is not those things.
No, and this is what we thought it was going to be like, which was just very high energy, more classic anime, kind of this interesting mishmash of mid-19th century America and like 20th century Japan.
Which we didn't get. We got something really thoughtful and wonderful, but with this one, that's kind of what we got.
Yeah.
And it's, what are some of like the big bullet points to talk about? Because again, go back to listen to episode 1. We talk about it in more great detail.
I mean, one of the things we appreciated about it, I remember from the previous episode, is that the nice thing about animation is that you can make children look like children.
Yeah, no, that is a good thing.
Yeah.
That works.
What were some of the things that you noticed about it?
I mean, this was like, it's a good and a bad thing. It's one of the only ones that actually had a black character in it. Because, I mean, this whole story takes place during the Civil War. And I find the timing interesting of needing to talk about this right now in a place in our history where everyone is rightfully kind of reevaluating the Civil War and the Confederacy and systemic racism in this country and the role of slavery in the South. I think it's important to mention this is like the only one of any version that we watch that actually shows an enslaved person.
Yes, or a formerly enslaved person because he escaped.
Yeah, and that's good. That's a good thing. I think it is very good in a story that takes place during the Civil War to acknowledge the essential problem during the Civil War that was being addressed.
Yeah, and the fact that the Alcotts were rabid abolitionists.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it is entirely appropriate. The execution of it
is a little weird.
It's a little weird. It doesn't really work that well. The animation's not amazing. Character design's not amazing. The voice isn't amazing. But, like, points for trying.
Yeah.
Like, I think...
Good for you, Japan, in 1980.
They get, like, a C for showing up, I would say. I would say the execution kind of fails.
Yeah.
But, like, I think it's worth mentioning. Is it worth seeing?
Yeah, it's only like 45 minutes long. You should definitely watch it.
Yeah, I don't know about the TV show, but the special was definitely worth mentioning.
Yeah, I had this as a kid. We had it on VHS tape. I used to watch this all the time.
Yeah, and it's like, again, we enjoyed it more than the 1949 one. I think one of the things that's going to come up more and more as we get into like the second half of the episode is... I think we really need to start talking about values in terms of retelling a story. So we know the things that we value in an adaptation of anything. And as we're watching 10 versions of Little Women, we really talked a lot with each other about the things that we value in an adaptation of Little Women. And so I bring it up now only to make it clear, like, we're going to get into some ones where the ranking may not be what other people want it to be. And it's not because we're saying this one is better than another one, but like whatever's number one just happened to match our what we value in an adaptation of Little Women more than whatever number 4 did or number 5 did.
Sure.
And I don't know if it's worth getting into like some of those values right now, but I think we will get into them a little bit later. But like, yeah, we enjoyed the anime one more than we did the June Allison 1949 Technicolor movie. Yeah. Even though, I'm just going to tell this story again. When we went to Orchard House on the tour, this is the loveliest woman gave us the tour.
An older lady.
She was wonderful. And then at the end, we asked her like, hey, what's your favorite version of Little Women? She goes, oh, the June Allison one is absolutely my favorite. We had watched it at that point and we didn't like it and we felt bad and didn't say anything.
We just said, that's wonderful.
So like, if that one's your favorite, we apologize, but it did not match up with the things we value in a Little Women adaptation.
Yes. And if you want to hear us talk slightly longer length about the anime, listen to the previous episode.
So that brings us to number 6 on our list. And hey, let's talk about one we didn't watch for episode number 1.
We did not watch it because we didn't want to pay for it. And we did this time.
Yeah, we did. It was kind of the only way that we could watch it easily. So I had to buy it. We weren't going to watch it for this episode originally. And then
because we didn't want to pay for it.
Well, I didn't think it was available.
Yeah.
And then I found out like I could just get it on iTunes. And so I sat you down. I said, sweetie,
we have to spend $13.
We need to do this. We have to for our fan.
For our fans.
Maybe
we should start a Patreon. We've spent $13 to watch this.
I mean, if a couple of people kick in, for our free show. So we watched the 1970 BBC miniseries. What was it? It was like 9 episodes.
Half-hour episodes.
It was nine half-hour episodes. We watched over the course of a couple of days. It's actually funny. I feel like for the people that listen to our Pride and Prejudice episodes, we really go in detail about like what the BBC miniseries were like in the 70s and 80s. And I actually feel like we would just end up repeating ourselves a lot. Like really low budget. The sets are really cheap.
The wigs are really bad.
Yeah.
The costumes are not great.
So a lot of that echoes like the 1980 version of Pride and Prejudice.
My only note that I wrote down is really bad wigs.
So yeah, the wigs aren't good.
I have a question. I have a technical question about wigs.
Okay.
Maybe someone can help me with this. Did wig technology improve between 1970 and now? Because I know there's such a thing as a lace front wig, and that makes it easier to blend like the hairline of the wig with your skin. This did not have that. Every wig either had like giant bangs, or you could basically see the gap between the forehead and the front of the wig. And I'm just curious to know like what changed in wig technology. So if anyone can help me with that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I always wonder with this kind of stuff how much of it is just a kind of a result of the fact that like they knew no one would ever be watching this on a screen that was bigger than like 15 to 20 inches.
That's true.
And here we are watching it on like a giant flat screen TV compared to the time. It's unfair. It's an unfair comparison. They didn't know anyone would ever be watching it like this.
Well, we did watch, this is jumping ahead, but we watched A Little Women from 1950 that had the original ads in it, remember?
Oh, yeah.
For the giant TV that was 12 inches. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's not this.
So there's like, I guess I have two things to say about this one. One, it's pretty good.
Well, I liked it.
It's pretty good. We enjoyed
it.
We enjoyed it. Like, I thought it was one of those things where, like, you take everything that I said about William Shatner, where, like, his acting is impeccable and no one can convince me otherwise. But, like, the big thing that brought it down is the accent.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you. It's 1/3 rhetorical, 1/3 for you, and 1/3 for our audience. I want to hear everybody's opinion on this.
Uh-huh.
Can someone's acting still be considered good when their accent is really, really bad?
I mean, it's part of the whole picture, isn't it? Like if it's so distractingly bad that it's preventing them from portraying the character well, then I think no. I mean, in this case, the nice thing was they sort of all forgot to do their American accents by like episode 3 or so.
Oh, they were all trying so hard.
They all just kind of gave up. So it was really consistent that they just sort of all became British about like a quarter of the way into the show.
I know Hannah was Southern the entire time.
Hannah was weirdly Southern the entire time, but it like wasn't distracting because they had all just given up, in my opinion.
Yeah. I really do hope people listen to the first episode because we're talking about characters without really saying who they are.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we have the time to do that.
We don't have the time.
Hannah, the housekeeper.
Yeah.
Where to, like, I guess talk about Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Angela Down played Joe in this one. And she's exactly who I'm talking about when I say, like, does a bad accent completely scuttle, like, good acting?
Yeah.
I actually think she's pretty good in this.
I think she's good. Like, she's very feisty. The dialogue in this is actually pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's well written. I like her as Joe. I find her believable. It's a fine line to walk with Joe because she can kind of be like a little bit overly like whiny and annoying, but then she could also be like a little overly sweet. But she kind of walks that nice fine line there.
Her accent, though.
I mean, as I said, she starts off really trying. I mean, they're British. This is a BBC show. They're all
Mm-hmm.
British actors, British TV actors. So she starts off really trying, and then she is just British. By the end, she's just British.
Yeah, it's the accent's terrible. There's a couple people that show up that are kind of cool. Patrick Troughton is Mr. March. He's a Doctor Who.
He's just a cool looking guy.
Yeah, he's a cool Doctor Who
Mm-hmm.
as the dad. With the length of time that they had with this one, they definitely go into some areas that we don't see in a lot of the ones. We see a lot of Meg and John's married life. Like, we get the whole scene where his friend comes over and she goes crazy.
Oh, and their fight is like, she's so, it was like way too intense. She like kicked him out of the house and like slammed the door. Remember this?
Mm-hmm.
And it was not good.
Well, doesn't she like run upstairs and his friend comes in and goes like, no, it's fine. Ha 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 ha. And he says, no, come on. We're going to be men making dinner for ourselves.
Yeah.
What a crazy
Oh,
notion.
jeez.
I don't know. Like, this is one of those ones. I don't know what else to talk about. Like, it's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Some things like genuinely. Oh, okay. So I will tell you one thing that worked for me really, really well, and one thing that did not work for me at all.
Great, because I just thought of something that didn't work for me either.
I thought a thing that worked was Mr. Lawrence. I thought he was actually pretty fantastic in this one.
Yeah, he was really good in this one.
Really, really good. And actually probably the best accent out of all of them.
Yeah, well, because he can be British. Like, he is British in a lot of them.
But his accent wasn't British. His accent was just like a refined American.
Yeah.
And it worked really, really well.
Yeah.
I thought he was good. It was really refreshing because we watched this one after the 1978 miniseries, which had the like terrible Mr. Lawrence, who was very poorly written.
Mm-hmm.
This one actually worked really, really well, I thought. But then I compare him to Laurie.
Yeah.
Who was like this really weird combination. If you took David Byrne and Chris Sarandon and like mixed them up in a food processor or something like that, you would get this guy. And he was kind of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't really do much acting after this either.
No.
But like his American accent was pretty terrible, but like his acting also wasn't super good.
Yeah. And then he was well matched with Amy, because I also really didn't like Amy in this one, because when she was 12, she looked way too old. And by the time she was 20, she was acting way too young. I thought she was acting like very bratty for 20. She kind of played 12 all the way through.
if you don't do it well, I feel like the Laurie-Amy relationship feels very predatory.
Yeah.
And this is one of the ones where it felt kind of predatory.
Yeah.
Like, he felt like he was really taking advantage of, like, a girl.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that. I mentioned Hannah being weirdly Southern.
She also did, much like Marilla in that old Anne of Green Gables we watched, she had a distracting bosom. Remember how low her bosom was? I got some shit for saying that people's breasts were by their shoulders. Rightly so, because that's not where breasts are.
Yeah, hers are like kind of just
belly button.
Pointing down.
Pointing down.
Yeah.
Just like
her
Marilla.
breasts are just going, what's that down there?
I don't understand why people on TV can't have support garments.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
BBC couldn't afford that in 1970.
Could not.
You mentioned the 1951.
Yes.
Let's move on to the 1951.
Okay.
So this is number 5 on our list. This one, again, this was one of the ones that we didn't plan on watching, and then we found out that it was available. It's on like YouTube, and one of the parts is on Amazon Prime. So this was originally broadcast as part of Studio One in Hollywood. This is part of that grand tradition that ran, for years, where the studios also had TV shows where they would do adaptations of their movies, and they would get all of their contract players to be in it.
Yeah.
So you're seeing people who are actually like not movie stars, but they are movie actors.
Like, don't get it twisted. Not stars.
No, but they are movie actors doing stripped down kind of regional theater versions of movies that we've seen. We watched like when we did Miracle on 34th Street, we watched one of them, and it ended up being kind of fun. So we found that there was a 1950 version of Little Women. It was originally broadcast in 2 episodes. One was called Meg's Story, and the other one was called Joe's Story.
Yes.
So they had to make some choices in the writing because they really expand on Meg's whole thing with Mr. Brooke in the first one.
Yeah.
And Joe's kind of a minor character in it.
Yeah.
But then the second one is all Joe in New York with Professor Bear.
Yeah.
I would say there are 3 or 4 things of note with this one that we enjoyed.
Yes.
Was there anything that jumped out at you as being of note about this one?
Yes. The casting of the character of Joe.
Mm.
Joe in this version is played by Nancy Marchand, who is Tony Soprano's mother.
This is her first acting credit of all time.
At all. She was 22?
Yeah.
And they do
25, I think.
25. They do a very Katharine Hepburn thing with her. Like they've got her hair just like Katharine Hepburn in the 33 version, and I think she's kind of been instructed to act a little Katharine Hepburn-y. She's great. She's really good. She's really spunky. She's really cute. It's very weird because she looks like Tony Soprano's mother, despite only being in her early 20s.
She's definitely got that Patrick Stewart thing where she like raced to middle age and then stayed there forever.
Like her face is old, like just the inside part of her face, but then the rest of her is young. She's got very strong features. Like she's got kind of like a strong chin and like a strong nose. Like she's a distinctive looking person.
Like if you watch The Sopranos and you haven't seen this before, don't think for a second that you're going to watch it and go, I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to pick her out.
Yeah, no.
You're going to pick her out.
I like freaked out.
Yeah. So that was of note.
Yeah.
That was like the moment that she walks on screen was the moment where we went from like not caring about this to kind of being invested in it.
Yeah.
Like it was way more enjoyable than we expected it to be.
It was good. Like, yeah, I mean, some of the dialogue's a little bit clunky. I mean, it's high on our list. I think for the acting. Like I think all the acting was really good in it.
Yeah.
We liked Laurie. We liked Meg a lot, which was good because the whole first half was they kind of as you said, they kind of expanded on the Meg and John Brooke story. I don't remember Amy very well. Amy and Beth was a very minor character in this. Like Beth was hardly in it at all.
Well, Beth, she does die. We do get that scene.
Yeah.
They kind of gloss over it. This is one of those things where let's talk about values for a second. I feel like one of the things that we value more than others is a really good retelling of the Beth storyline. I personally value that. If I see a version of Little Women that I feel isn't as effective with the Beth storyline, I'm not going to connect to it as much emotionally as I am to one that really does that story justice.
Yeah.
And this one doesn't really do it justice. It does it. It's there. Beth, I don't think they get an A just for showing up. You can't just have Beth and kill her. That's not enough.
Right.
I think you actually have to work kind of hard to make sure that storyline works. Whereas like Joe's storyline, I thought kind of works. Like Professor Bear doesn't really work in this one.
He's not good in this one. He's the one with the hair that like was stuck straight up off his head, right?
I think this is the only version where the actor is like, I think the
actually
actor's German. I think he's German.
Because there's a grand tradition of Professor Bear being like from every country in Europe except Germany.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say, like, he's book accurate in that, you know, he's described in the book as being kind of too old for Joe and not very attractive. And he's kind of too old for Joe and not very attractive.
Check and check.
Yeah, but like I have to say, like, seeing that on screen maybe doesn't work. Like I do like a sexy Professor Bear.
I don't think that's the problem though. I
Yeah.
thought the problem with him is that his whole attitude is very squirrely.
Yeah.
For some reason. He was very, very amped up. He was very, very high energy, and he was very, very apologetic about everything he was doing.
Maybe it's because we just watched so much Pride and Prejudice. Maybe he made us think of Mr. Collins a little bit. He was very deferential.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I didn't appreciate that.
Yeah, no, don't want that.
That's not a thing I value
It's
in
no
a
good.
Little Women adaptation.
You want a confident Mr. Bear.
Yeah, but not so confident that he's a complete piece of shit to her about her writing.
Yeah, because we did see that as well.
Yeah, and he treats her writing terribly.
Yeah, he does not like it.
And I don't know, what's your interpretation of Professor Bear reading Joe's writing in the book and criticizing it? What was always your impression of how his reaction was?
I mean, he's not saying like her writing is bad or that she's bad for making money. Like, he never really says that. What he basically says is, don't do this for too long. It's bad for your soul.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to see you get hurt.
Yeah.
By doing this. It's not good for you. It's just like eating too many sweets and not enough vegetables.
Yeah.
You know?
And from what I remember, this is one of the ones where he is like very, very negative
He's,
about
like,
her
angry.
writing. Yeah, really, really angry about it. So that didn't work for me. So Nancy Marchand, good.
Yeah.
Professor Bear in this one, not so good. I want to talk about Hannah before we move on. This was a delight because Hannah is played by Una O'Connor.
Right.
Una O'Connor, who was in The Bride of Frankenstein, which we've watched on this show. She was in The Adventures of Robin Hood, which we watched on this show. She is a goddamn movie star, I would say.
Yes.
If you've seen those movies and you watch this one, you'll recognize her. She's just
the screaming woman in Bride of Frankenstein.
Like, she is, I think, the perfect example of the actors in this who just are working goddamn actors who showed up and did a great job.
Yeah.
She came to act. And act she does.
Yes.
She was a delight.
She's great.
Anything else want to jump out at you about this one? Well, I got one last thing.
Go for it.
This episode was brought to you by Westinghouse. This was the best part of it.
We love this.
This was so great that they actually had the original ads in the middle of it. I can't wait. Hang on. So this is one of the things that confused me a little bit. When we began watching it, I went to IMDb and I was looking up the cast, which I do for all of these. And it was interesting to see Betty Furness as herself, which I didn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to the ads, and we got to see Betty Furness talking through all of the new Westinghouse products that you can get for your home.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, people know about this kind of stuff. It's not like I'm like talking about something really revelatory for people, but I gotta say, watching this in the context of its time, I still think to this day, I'm not the first person to say this, but I still think it's a major miss that like the TV shows that come out on like DVD and digital from our childhoods don't include the commercials from those times.
I know. It's a shame.
It was such a huge part of what those were. That the fact that it's not even an option ever really bums me out.
Well, it was just so much fun to hear her call a 20-inch screen absolutely enormous and hold up a piece of paper signifying the size of a 10-inch screen against the 20-inch screen as we watched it on our
on our TV, that is, we'll just say it's many times
larger.
greater than that. It is larger than that. Yes, that definitely jumped out. I loved, my favorite was, I think it was in episode 2, we learn about the Westinghouse dryer that has the dial on it that lets you dry it to your level of dampness that makes it appropriate for ironing later.
Right. You could choose either dry or damp.
Or somewhere in between. You had those options. This one was just, it was fun. It was fun in a lot of different ways. I'm really glad we watched it. And yeah, like more enjoyable than all the other ones that we've talked about so far for us.
If you can find it on YouTube, definitely recommend giving it a watch. Well, I guess that brings us to number 4 on our list, on our VH1 Top 10 Countdown. And that is going to be 1933's Little Women, shockingly titled Little Women with Katharine Hepburn.
So I guess like we don't even need to talk about this one for very long because like A, we talked about it in the first episode at great length, and B, like 1949, 1950, 1933, they're all kind of like the same version of Little Women told slightly differently in that there's different actors and minor changes. But why? Okay, in 2 words, can you tell the audience why, of those 3, this one was the highest on our list? Why did we enjoy this one the most?
Katharine Hepburn.
Those are 2 good words.
Yeah.
Like, I think everyone's pretty much in agreement that those are 2 very good
Everyone's
words.
sold on Katharine Hepburn. Not one person dislikes Katharine Hepburn.
Can I have a confession to make?
Okay.
I don't actually remember this one that much.
Yeah. I mean, I remember it because we had it on VHS tape when I was a kid. So this one and the anime were the 2 that I was the most familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, we talked about it in the previous episode. Katharine Hepburn is great as Jo. She's a little old, but
Yes,
that's okay.
She's too old. But this was like one of her first credits. You couldn't get Katharine Hepburn. You can't get a teenage Katharine Hepburn.
No.
You couldn't.
No, she
you
was
couldn't
like-
get one for love or money.
She was at home in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Going to finishing school or whatever. We talked in the first episode about how in general, this script, which is also the 1949 script and pretty similar to the 1950 script, is not modern in the sense that the March family are just like nice people. And Marmee is just a nice mom.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't factor in any of the sort of progressive elements of the Alcott family.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking earlier about what do we value in a Little Women adaptation? And I
Yeah.
think one of the things that we found watching through all of these 10 was we really liked it when the real life elements of the author's family were brought in even more so than in the book, which is not necessarily how we feel about any given adaptation. Like, I think we generally like it when a book kind of stands on its own. But in this case, I think we felt that there was stuff that the family was interested in and a certain way that they had of interacting with the world that she really couldn't write about at the time. And so injecting that into Little Women in a more modern context is actually kind of fulfilling the author's vision even more so than just straight doing the book. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. This is actually something that kind of bothers me when we watch a lot of these adaptations, is I get the sense from the creators that the reason that they're adapting Little Women and the perspective they're bringing to it is, oh, wasn't life great back then? Wasn't life great when people had these like nice families and traditional values, and like a very conservative kind of viewpoint of it, when in reality, as you say, the Alcotts were a super progressive family. And so if you play them like they're not, you're actually missing something huge that we really value.
Yeah.
So that kind of bothered me in almost all of them up until here.
Yeah.
But like the next few, like the last 3 we're going to talk about, all I think embrace the the progressive nature of the family to different levels, but they definitely embrace it.
Yeah.
So 1933's Katharine Hepburn, I feel like if you're going to watch a classic Hollywood version of Little Women, we liked this one more than 1949.
This is the one to watch. And if you want to see like a weird pregnant Amy in her 20s surrounded by actual little girls in the schoolroom, this is absolutely the one for you.
Yeah. So I think that means we can make our way to like the really good ones.
Yes. And these are the ones that people have been asking us to cover. So we can spend a little bit more time on these, I hope.
Yeah, we kind of blown through this a little bit.
Yeah.
So not to interrupt, but like before we go on, I do just want to prepare people. The order of these 3 may surprise some people. It surprised us a little bit.
Yeah.
This is not what I was expecting, but nothing crazy.
Yeah.
But I think we need to move to number 3.
Again, by popular request.
And also we wanted to.
But also by popular request. Little Women, written and directed by Greta Gerwig, 2019. Filmed right here in Massachusetts. We spotted 1 or 2 people we knew as background extras.
This one's hard to talk about.
Yeah.
Can I tell you what I was afraid of?
Yes.
Here's what I was afraid of. We did Pride and Prejudice. We watched the 2005 version. We didn't like it at all. And we were super critical of it, knowing that it's really important to a lot of people.
Yes.
And for a lot of people, that's their version of Pride and Prejudice. Neither of us saw this when it was in theaters. We didn't see it during award season. I have a lot of people I know who saw it and absolutely loved it. And just it kept going on, and I hadn't seen it. And I was just really worried we were going to watch it and not like it.
Yeah,
it was
I
like
was
my
worried
biggest fear.
I was worried we were going to hate it.
Yeah.
I really was worried. And people had been asking me, like I said, multiple people, what did you think of it? Multiple people saying to me, I need you to see it because I need to talk about it with you.
Here's the good news.
Yeah.
We liked it a whole lot.
Yeah.
It's really, really good.
I think I went into it feeling extra critical, so maybe I was in an unfair mindset because it was the very last one that we watched before sitting down to record. So I think I had both expectations for it in my mind. Like, I was worried that I was going to hate it, and I was really hoping that I was going to absolutely love it. And neither of those things were true.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked it. I didn't love it. I certainly didn't hate it, but I was going in sort of prepared to love it. So the things that were happening that I didn't absolutely love felt like extra disappointing.
Mm-hmm. So before we go any further into the stuff we liked and the stuff we didn't, I think it's important for us to talk about kind of the big decisions, because Greta Gerwig made some really big decisions in this.
Yes.
For how she was planning on telling this story.
Yeah.
So it's funny, like the very first one we talked about had the whole like jumping back and forth in time thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I alluded to that there was another one. Here's another one that jumps back and forth in time.
Yeah.
I was reading about all the decisions she made about it. You cannot say she is anything less than thoughtful. She
No.
was very thoughtful about it, because her reason for jumping back and forth is she wanted to tell a version of the story that really focused on the March sisters as adults.
Mm-hmm.
And so that involved starting the story when they're adults.
Mm-hmm.
I guess she doesn't like Beth. She doesn't want. She wants to focus on them as adults, so that means she doesn't talk about Beth that much.
Well, she didn't.
Yeah. I mean, that was like that was something that kind of.
I mean, let me put it this way. I love a director with a point of view.
Yeah.
She had a point of view. There was one character that she clearly empathized with above any other character. We will come to that in a minute, but it was exceptionally clear which character she was the most interested in.
Yeah. So it's got this nonlinear timeline. And again, like I keep looking back at things that we've watched before, because like I hated the 2011 Jane Eyre.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing, we looked at that and we're like, okay, the only thing that they felt they could bring to it is, oh, we'll change the structure. We'll jump back and forth in time. And in that one, the thing that we really didn't like about it is that the jumps back and forward in time didn't seem to be motivated by anything that was happening in the story.
Yeah.
It seemed kind of random.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of this movie, I was really worried that that was happening here too.
Well, I think it was happening
Yeah.
for maybe the first 20 minutes or half an hour. I wrote down, I don't know why it's not linear. Nothing's happening to cause these flips in time. She's not like thinking about her sister and suddenly she's back in the past. Like it's just happening kind of randomly. And then when Joe gets on the train to go home from New York because Beth is sick again, the flashbacks did start to kind of line up with what she was experiencing. So she got on the train, she was thinking about Beth. It flashed back to Beth being sick the first time. She got home, she was using the key to open the mailbox that Lori put up. There was a flashback about when Lori built that mailbox and gave them all their keys. So it started to make sense. But for the first 20 minutes or maybe even half an hour, I was really scared that it was going to be like that Jane Eyre that we didn't like, or indeed like that the Leah Thompson Little Women that we really didn't like.
Yeah. Thankfully, it doesn't do that.
It does not.
It does start to make more sense. There were some things about it that kind of rubbed me the wrong way in terms of what Greta Gerwig needed to do in her writing to make this work. And one of the things that she needed to do was a lot of exposition.
Yeah.
So when we're meeting these characters, like at the beginning, we meet Joe and we meet Amy and we meet Lori like running into Amy in Europe. And there just has to be so much exposition between them to catch the audience up as to where we are in the story. And I didn't like that.
Yeah.
It just rubbed me the wrong way a little bit.
Well, the funny thing is, maybe I felt a little bit differently from you because I actually didn't feel like there was that much exposition. I mean, there had to be some. I didn't feel like it was particularly clunky. And what I actually thought was, you know what? This movie is made for people who know the story. I think if I didn't know the story, I would be very confused right now.
And that's a big question we have. And I don't know how to ask this question of anyone, but like I want to find someone who genuinely saw this and knew nothing about Little Women before they saw it.
Yeah.
And find out whether they were confused or not. Because if I found out that the filmmakers actively made the decision to say, we are not going to make this for people who don't know the story, that doesn't bother me.
It doesn't bother me either. I think I'm coming down on the side of it doesn't bother me. It reminded me, okay, I think at some point, things are so in the culture that not only is it okay to assume that everyone knows the story, it is almost necessary in order to create something new and different to shake things up in a particular way.
Yeah.
It reminded me, I might have talked about this on the podcast before. I don't remember if I have or not. But it reminded me of a production of Hamlet I saw in New York City a number of years ago, a really wonderful production by Theater for a New Audience. And Hamlet was played by Christian Camargo. And they made the decision. So there are a couple of speeches in Hamlet that everyone knows so well that like you almost can't hear them anymore. Like you almost can't hear the words. You're just kind of reciting along and you're not actually hearing the meaning. It's like saying the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Nobody actually like says the Pledge of Allegiance thinking about what the words mean. You're just like droning it off. And the director made the decision, and I thought a really smart decision, to move the to be or not to be speech. I forget who the director was, but they moved it so that it wasn't where it usually sits in the play. They moved it to immediately after intermission. So it's intermission. Everyone's like standing around talking. Intermission's over. The lights kind of start going down. It's still like slightly light in the very small theater. Some people are even like still talking, and then suddenly to be or not to be is happening. And the effect of that was because you had to sort of suddenly reorient yourself. You had a few seconds or a few moments where you didn't know it was to be or not to be. So you really were listening to the words to try to understand what was happening. And you realized it was to be or not to be. And there was this sort of like exhalation in the audience because something familiar was happening. But it was this really cool moment. I have always assumed it was done on purpose to have that sort of little moment of shock. If not, it was a very happy accident. But that's what it reminded me of. Like, let's just throw you in there and like make something happen, so that you can see this story kind of as if for the first time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it's one of those things where like I think I'm being overly critical only because it was so good. Like in watching it, one of the biggest frustrations I had throughout the entire thing is like, for me, it was really, really good and almost great. And I kept seeing these things where like if it just one more pass on the screenplay, like one more good set of feedback from people that she trusts, would have made it great for me and me personally.
Yeah.
But as it stands, it was really, really good.
Yeah.
But that one little part of it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
Like, I want to talk about the stuff that worked for us, but I thought it would be good to get this stuff out of the way first. Not that I have that much.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get into the stuff we liked, was there something else that like didn't really work for you?
Yes. The end. Anyone who has seen this movie is going to know exactly what I'm talking about.
This is kind of a spoiler, though, if you haven't seen it. It was a surprise for me, for sure.
Yeah. So you are warned. And you should see it because it's really, really, really fucking good. But you have been warned. The movie gets super meta at the end. It gets very reflexive. And the movie is we're at the end, and Professor Bear is leaving the March household, and Jo turns around and her whole family say like, would you love him? Clearly you love him. Go after him and everything. And then it cuts to her publisher in a weird little domestic scene with his wife that is very funny. It's a very funny movie. He has been given the first half of the story, and his daughters all run in because they've stolen it and they've read it, and they're like, what happens? What happens next? Does she marry? She has to marry him. Like, what? We have to know what's going on. We have to know what's happening. And
because he's already rejected the book.
Yeah.
And he's just got it lying around.
Or he's like planning on rejecting it.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, no, he has. Yeah. So we just watched it, so it's still a little fresh in my head. Then we get the whole scene where Jo is racing after Professor Bear to meet him at the train station, and intercut with this, at the height of the drama, is Jo sitting in front of him, and they are having a conversation about whether Jo as a character in the book should end up with Professor Bear. And she is saying no, she doesn't need to, which, if anyone knows anything about Louisa May Alcott, that's true. That was the conversation she had with her publisher. Maybe not specifically the conversation, but she made the ending of the book a final end of the romance between Jo and Bear because she felt pressure to do so. And I have a lot of respect for Greta Gerwig putting this in the movie.
And the implication is that Jo, in this timeline, has done exactly what she said she was going to do throughout the entire movie, which was not marry and be single and free and only responsible for herself.
Right. Then we cut back because she has been convinced to do it. And there's also a whole conversation about compensation and who owns the rights to sequels. And it's all very entertaining. It's very funny. And then we cut back. And then she does kiss him and we get the happy ending and everything like that.
And then we see the epilogue from the book, which is they're a few years older. The kids are all there. Marmie's there. But it's all kind of done in pantomime, and it's intercut with Jo having this sort of argument with her editor and then watching her book being being printed.
Yeah. And there's a cool thing that Gerwig does where at the very beginning of the movie, the title card is the front of the book, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And then the very last shot of the movie, it may be the very last shot of the movie. If it's not the last shot, it's like second to last shot, is the cover of the book. It's the exact same shot, but it's Little Women by Joe March. And that stuck out to me. I think it's an interesting thing to do.
Yeah.
So I want to be really clear about what my problem is. My problem isn't the end. I think it's fascinating, and I think it's interesting, and I think it says something about Louisa May Alcott. My problem is it kind of comes out of nowhere. And throughout this movie, I personally felt like I had the filmmaker telling me, be invested in these characters. Be invested in these characters. I'm going to do the normal things you find in storytelling to get you invested in the characters and make you care about them. And at the end, I'm going to tear the rug out from under you and tell you, well, hang on, maybe you should reevaluate your assessment of these characters, and they may not be as real as you hope they would be or as you want them to be. That was my reading of it. But I feel like the movie was like at times trying to commit to the story as is, but then it also throws this curveball at the end, and I kind of wish she had committed to one. And if this was going to be a very meta retelling of Little Women, I kind of wish it had been there the whole time. I wouldn't have minded seeing the publisher for more of the movie. The fact that it just suddenly happens felt to me like a filmmaker not really deciding what they want to do and kind of feeling like they want to do everything. And it just slightly rubbed me the wrong way. But I will be honest, your story about To Be or Not to Be in Hamlet is kind of making me rethink it a little bit, even though this is my like immediate reaction to it now.
I think that was a very well argued point. I totally am on board and respect your feelings on this matter. I'm gonna have to go ahead and disagree with you.
That's fine.
It took me a while. I had to really think about it.
Yeah.
I had to kind of think about how I felt.
I mean, you might be convincing me.
I had to sleep on it. I had to pray on it. I like it. I think I like it. I don't see for myself that it prevented me, the audience, from caring about the characters. I don't think I cared about the characters any less, and I don't think it was the director saying you shouldn't care about these characters. I think it emphasized Joe, the author, depicting these characters, her family members, in a very loving way. And I liked seeing Joe happy and reflecting on her life, and I liked that she got what she wanted. The whole movie, she says, I want to be single. I don't want to be tied down. I don't want to get married. She says it the whole movie. And she gets what she wants at the end. Like there could be no more perfect ending. It's almost a fairy tale ending, because she says what she wants and then she gets what she wants. And you see her at the end just thinking about all these things that Dewey Cox got to think about his whole life before he plays. And I guess going back to kind of what I was saying before, I don't mind that there's one version of Little Women that goes a little meta and a little bit weird and unusual at the end. If this were the only version of Little Women in existence, I might be like, oh man, couldn't they just have done the book? I think I said the same thing about Anne of Green Gables with Anne with an E. Like if Anne with an E were the only thing that existed, you might say like, I wish someone just did the book. I'd love to just see this book. But it's not. There's so many. And I don't really have a problem with the director saying, like, I get what you're saying, that like you wish you would have committed to it like even more. But like that's as may be. I just don't have, I guess I don't really have any issue with a version that's trying to do something a little bit different, and in my opinion does it fairly successfully.
Well, I just want to jump in for a second because I want to be clear. I also don't have a problem with it. I think it is really valuable, and I completely agree with you that it is good that a version like this exists. I just, like, I have my opinion about how it could have been handled earlier in the movie, not later in the movie.
Yeah.
I actually, that's the thing, like, on its own, it's really, really good. It's just kind of in the context of the whole thing, I had, like, the tiniest problem with it. I'm, like, quibbling over, like, number 3 on our list.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's like, and this Olympic finish, this clearly placed and got a medal. But let's move on
Mm-hmm.
from the end, because we've talked about the beginning, we've talked about the end. I feel like in order to talk about the stuff we both really liked, there's one thing that kind of surprised us a little bit. Because I know multiple times during the movie we looked at each other and we weren't upset about it when we said it. We were just kind of acknowledging we're not like super emotionally invested in what's happening right now.
Yeah, and we kept saying, I don't know why.
Yeah.
It was weird. And I kept saying to you, like, I want to like this, and I just don't feel emotional about it. And
Yeah.
maybe that's just where I'm coming from right now. Maybe that's not the movie's fault at all.
No, not at all. It's trying to do a thing, and I genuinely don't have a problem with something done well that's trying to do something different than what I'm like looking for. Can I tie it back to something I talked about earlier?
Sure.
Talk about Beth for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned in one of the earlier ones, like for me, one of the things I value is a really kind of loving version of the story of Beth and what she goes through, and this one kind of gave Beth the least amount of a lot of the versions that we watched in a weird way. Did you feel that?
Yeah, they didn't spend a lot of time on Beth.
Yeah.
They spent more time on Meg and her marriage, I think, than they did on Beth, because they gave Meg some of the like after marriage scenes that we don't see that often, like with the buying the dress and the coat and everything. But yeah, we didn't get a lot of Beth.
They gave a lot of time to Amy.
Well, we're gonna talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, we got to wait on Amy for a second.
Yeah.
But that is again one thing that I found. I just reached the end going, man, I wish I'd seen a little bit more about that.
I think I have a speculation.
Yes.
As to
some wild speculation.
One of the reasons I felt like I didn't connect with these characters as deeply as I would have hoped. And I don't even actually know if this is the case or not. It's just a speculation. And I feel really shitty for saying this, because every single one of these people are really good actors and did a really good job. And I think we're really well cast. So I'm kind of talking about the production as a whole. Almost every actor in this movie is not American and was working in an accent.
Okay.
And I don't know if that makes a difference or not. I have no idea. Christian Bale is not American and is working in an accent, and I connect with him deeply as Laurie in the 1994 version. And maybe that's part of the reason I had a hard time really feeling them as four sisters, because they're all like from four different countries working in sort of four different accents, and their accents are all really, really good individually. Like, I'm not picking on anyone's accent. I think maybe it's just this sort of indefinable thing that caused it not to gel for me in the way that I wanted. Although there is one part that's super funny when they're like play acting up in the attic, and Emma Watson has to do a fake British accent as Meg, and her fake British accent is really, really funny.
I talk a lot on this show about tropes that I don't like that show up all the time. If I had to make a top 5 tropes that I fucking love every time, it's someone play acting their real accent.
Yeah.
I love it. Every time. It's never not entertaining.
It was super funny. So anyway, I don't say that to be like xenophobic or anything. I just think maybe that's part of the reason that the sisters as an ensemble didn't come together for me the way that I wanted.
And I also don't know if we'd even be talking about it if we didn't talk about it so like distinctly when we were talking about the 1970 version, where the accents were terrible.
Right.
And we actually asked each other, like, is it still good acting if the character's believable but the accent is bad? Like here, none of the accents are bad at all, but there are those moments.
Yeah.
There are those little moments that are kind of unavoidable.
Yeah.
I want to stick a pin in something and then come back to it in a few minutes, but I have a weird theory about why this movie didn't work quite as well for like us as it could have. Like, or maybe me. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, but I have a weird theory.
Okay, well, I just did my weird theory, so you do yours.
Well, I want to wait it for a second because I want to talk about the stuff we liked first.
Oh, okay.
Because it involves that.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about the stuff we liked?
Yes, I have my nomination for Best Supporting Actor in
Who
this.
is that?
I loved Chris Cooper as Mr. Lawrence.
He was fucking amazing.
His performance really touched me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was like... We've seen Mr. Lawrence's that were like way too mean and way too removed. And we've seen Mr. Lawrence's that we were like, why is he there all the time? What is going on? Why is he just having these conversations with every single girl? But this Mr. Lawrence sort of had the right amount of distance. He was very kind. The scene where they kind of all troop into the house and are just being loud and weird and unusual, and Marmy's kind of trying to corral the girls and apologize and thank Mr. Lawrence for, I forget what scene this is, for whatever kindness he's done them. And the breakfast he sends, that like he's just great. I really like him. The scene that I really loved in particular was when Beth is at the house playing the piano, and he's sitting on the stairs like listening to her play, and we have learned that he had a daughter who died when she was young, that it was her piano. Like that's from the book. And it hasn't really been played, and he loves to hear Beth play it, and like his face as he sits on the stairs, like I got really choked up. I mean, I happen to know that Chris Cooper had a son who passed away like as a young man. So I couldn't help but think about that like that reaction thinking about your dead child was surely genuine, and really heartbreaking to watch that happen on somebody's face. You'll understand someday.
Well, I was super torn about that scene because, like, on the one hand, it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. It's the emotion is so intense and so good. But on the other hand, Beth's story is so important to me, and in that moment, like the story kind of stops being about Beth and it starts being about him instead.
Yeah,
and she really fades into the background.
Well, he kind of stole the scene because he's best supporting actor.
Well, yeah, but also the camera literally leaves Beth and goes to him.
Yeah.
And that's a really specific choice to make, and it's not the wrong choice. It is a very good choice that happens to do a thing that makes me not respond to it as much.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's weirdly like my favorite scene and also my least favorite scene in the movie.
Yeah.
But I want to go a little bit further than Chris Cooper here for a second. What a fucking cast.
Yeah.
What a goddamn good cast. I genuinely don't think anyone stood out as being anything less than really, really good.
No.
Do you want to just run through everyone for a second?
Yeah, let's do it.
Like, Saoirse Ronan, clearly this relationship she is forming with Greta Gerwig is paying dividends.
She's Greta Gerwig's muse at this point.
Yeah, and you know what? It works. The two of them work together. I found that the monologue in the attic that Gerwig added about like when Joe's talking to Marmee about like what it is to be a woman, it like, God, for 10 seconds, I felt really shitty because my immediate reaction is, well, this feels a little unnatural and shoehorned in, but then I was totally sold on it.
Yeah.
Like the whole time, like everything, Saoirse Ronan sold me on it. I was totally sold on it. It worked perfectly.
Yeah.
Emma Watson as Meg, yeah, her accent was really good,
really
though.
Good. Yeah, she's done an American accent in other things before, I think.
Yeah, she was incredibly good in this.
Yeah.
Florence Pugh was Amy.
Yep. We're going to talk about her in a minute.
Yep. Eliza Scanlon was Beth. She was fine.
Beth was not emphasized in this version.
Yeah. Laura Dern is Marmee.
Well, the funny thing was, so this is like tiny spoiler for the next version we're going to talk about, but Emily Watson's performance as Marmee in the PBS version made me think of The Fault in Our Stars, because there was, I'm not going to spoil it, I'm going to talk about it in a minute, but there was a part that she has when she's talking about Beth that reminded me of the mom in The Fault in Our Stars, who at that point I did not remember was Laura Dern. So I just thought it was funny that like Laura Dern's playing the mom of a dying child once again. I really liked her. I thought she was good. For some reason, she felt a little modern to me, but that's okay because we know that Abba Alcott was a very modern person.
Yeah. It was her energy level for me. I felt like her energy was kind of too up the whole movie.
She was like a young mom. She was the cool mom.
Yeah, but like the mom who thinks she's the cool mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though I love Marmee.
Yeah.
And she felt the same way for me in The Fault in Our Stars for some reason. I get the sense from some actors that like they're so happy to be there. Sometimes that energy comes out, even though that may not be 100% right for the character.
She was kind of like that in Star Wars too. She was just really happy to be there.
She's so good in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Pew pew.
Pew, pew. She got a great scene actually. I don't know that we've seen this in many other versions. We got to see the scene where she's like handing out like clothes and food and stuff to the soldiers and the people like leaving and coming and going. And we got a line from a person of color. Her coworker at the volunteer station is a Black woman, and she got a little dig in because Marmee was like, I'm, for the first time, I've been ashamed of my country my whole life, and I'm really glad we're fighting this war. And the Black woman's like, you should still be ashamed. Or it was like, yeah, you're right.
It was good. It felt good watching it now.
Yeah, I don't know who that actress is that had those two lines. Maybe she was like a local actress.
Yeah, I didn't get her name.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Father March for a second. This is, again, one of those things. I just have to own this as a personal problem. I can't look at Bob Odenkirk as anyone other than Bob Odenkirk.
Yeah.
But I feel like you're probably more objective about it. How was he as Mr. March?
He was great. His part in this was not very big.
Mm-hmm.
This was not a movie about men.
Yeah.
Proudly so.
Except Mr. Lawrence.
Except Mr. Lawrence. Well, he was supporting, as I said.
And Laurie.
Yeah.
Laurie, let's just talk. So this is a very special thing. Was this your first Chalamet?
This is my first Chalamet.
This is my first Chalamet, too.
I was a Chalamet virgin.
Did you come out of this thinking like, oh, I get what everyone sees now?
He's not my type.
I get it. I think I get it. He's got an energy. He's unique.
Yeah.
He definitely has that unique thing going for him, but I didn't fall in love with him the way a lot of people have.
I just don't go for wee men. It's just not my type. He's very wee and very adorable and very pixie-like. And that's just not for me.
Yeah, his Laurie was kind of shitty, which is not a problem.
He wasn't shitty as Laurie.
No.
Laurie was kind of a shitty person.
Yeah. So it felt like he was relishing it a little too much. Yeah. No, I have nothing bad to say about Timothée Chalamet.
No, he was good.
He was really, really good in it. Sometimes I feel like you look at a character like Aunt March and you say, well, the default is Meryl Streep. I feel like that's kind of cheating. It's kind of phoning it in. That's not what happened here.
No, she's in there with no makeup, looking great, doing all her little Streep mannerisms. Like, she's very Meryl Streep. She does not disappear into this role for me.
Which is fine.
As she famously supposedly does, but really doesn't, because she's always Meryl Streep. She was happy to be there too. I think she was having a lot of fun. She got some good lines. She got some fun scenes.
Yeah. And I guess briefly we can touch on all the men.
Yeah.
Because, we mentioned Mr. Lawrence before. Chris Cooper is one of the best people in the movie. His performance is incredible. What did you think of Tracy Letts as Mr. Dashwood, the publisher, a new character?
He's fine.
He's super fun.
He's fine.
He was real fun.
He was fun.
I see, and he was in Lady Bird also, and I just feel like he's an actor who 100% gets what Greta Gerwig is trying to do. And I feel like he did a job that another actor wouldn't have been able to do.
It's funny because I know him primarily as a playwright.
I know. Well, that's why I pointed him out to you. Because I figured you would.
Yeah.
Bob Odenkirk is Bob Odenkirk, and I will never see him as anything other than Bob Odenkirk. Louis, I don't know if it's Jarrell or Garel as Professor Bear. Let's talk about the Professor Bear of it all.
Okay. I mean, he's in it all the way through because we're starting in the present or future, essentially. We see him right from the beginning. He's not not in it for 3/4 of the movie like most Little Women's.
Yeah.
He was funny.
Yeah.
Is German, does a good German accent.
He does a good German accent.
Yeah. I thought, to everyone's credit, the scene where he tells Jo that her stories are not very good, I think is one of the best that we saw.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think it was the best
The
one.
best. Okay, well, I was hedging a little bit.
Don't
I'm happy
hedge.
to say it's the best.
Don't hedge. It's the best one.
I'm happy to say it's the best because he was offering calm feedback and she was freaking the fuck out.
But not so much that we hate her as a character.
No.
She was freaking out in a very believable way.
Yeah. She did the thing where she said, what did she say? She was like, how would you possibly know? You don't even write stories. And he was like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Of course I don't. But I can read.
Yeah.
Like
I fundamentally feel that every writer-director has to, at some point in their career, make a movie about writing.
Yeah.
Because every writer has a chip on their shoulder about being a writer, and they've got to get out all of the stuff about being a writer onto the page or onto the screen at some point. And it was nice to see Greta Gerwig's.
Yeah.
This was clearly her doing this.
Well, he had such a good line, like in the middle of her freaking out. He's very calm the whole time. He's not screaming at her about writing moral poison for children. She's like, well, I've had rejections before. And he says to her, has no one ever talked to you about your writing? Has no one ever taken you seriously and sat you down and talked to you about your writing? And she's like, bah, 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 bah. But I was like, yeah, what a good point. Of course no one has. It's either her family who thinks everything she does is great, or an editor who doesn't care if it's good or not but knows what sells, or someone who doesn't take her seriously. But no one unrelated to her has ever actually critiqued her writing from a writing standpoint. Of course they haven't. And I wish they had spent a little more time on that. They didn't really come back to it. But I loved that I loved thinking about that perspective and the fact that he as a character had honed in on that so well.
Mm-hmm. And this gets to what I was saying. Like, I felt like every single time Joe was saying or doing anything about being a writer, I felt as an audience member like I was watching Greta Gerwig talk about herself, which is great and good, and I like seeing that.
Yeah.
I would have wanted to see more of it.
Mm-hmm.
If the movie became more about Joe being a writer, I would have been fine with this being the version of Joe as a writer that gets into what are the decisions that are made. But anyway, I don't want to rehash everything from before.
Yeah.
But this was like one of the best scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
I feel like this movie is full of just incredibly sharp dialogue.
Oh, yeah. The writing is so good. It's really good.
But not trying to be period accurate.
No.
And that's fine.
It's fine.
That worked for both of us. It's this is one of those movies that I definitely would call entertaining. I felt very entertained from beginning to end.
Totally.
So many great moments, so many good things. Is this the one where Hannah is constantly telling people they need to bring shoes with them, an extra pair of shoes wherever they go?
She's always offering shoes.
It's great. It's great. It is the writing in this is the dialogue in this is super, super sharp, and I really enjoyed that. And then I guess finally we got John. James Norton is John Brooke.
He's fine.
He's fine. I would go further and say he's really, really good. He's one of those people, I would watch this again and only watch him. I think he's one of those people that's doing a great job in the background.
A lot of background work.
Knowing that he's not the focus.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought he was really good.
I could certainly see why Meg was into him. He was very kind and very nice and very handsome.
Mm-hmm.
Very sweet when she spent $50 on the dress.
Yeah.
And although the coat scene itself was not sexy, he did feature in the most sex we've gotten in any version of Little Women, which is like after they're married, they kind of lean against the door frame of their new house and kiss and then go inside. Clearly to bone.
The way she falls backwards is a very sexy, like, you should be following me kind of thing.
Yeah. And I was kind of expecting to have like kind of a more, I don't know, graphic focus on like her pregnancy and childbirth, but I was okay that didn't happen because we had actually seen that in a different version that we're going to talk about in a minute, and I didn't need to see it twice.
Yeah. And that's it. Yeah, and I guess Florence Pugh played Amy, and there's not much else to talk about.
Okay. Greta Gerwig wanted to write a movie about Amy. Greta Gerwig clearly loves Amy.
Yep.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, not only is there nothing wrong with it, I think her love of that and the decision to cast Florence Pugh caused them to make something that I believe is truly incredible. I fucking loved Florence Pugh in this. And can I state an opinion?
Yes.
We watched 10 versions of Little Women.
Yes.
Florence Pugh is my favorite performance in any version that we watched.
Wow.
I think she was incredible. I thought she was a standout. I think she might have been too much of a standout, and I'll get back. I need to talk about my theory about this one. Do you want to talk about, like, kind of putting the performance aside for a second, what are the ways in which Greta Gerwig kind of enhances the story of Amy in this version? She takes a lot of time away from Beth, and boy, like you mentioned, she gives some of it to Meg. I think she gave all of it to Amy.
Yeah. I mean, she just makes her front and center. She is always there. Well, first of all, we don't have young Amy and old Amy.
No.
It's Florence Pugh all the way through. Somehow she manages to make her both 15 and 20 in the same actor without being weird. It really works. I don't think it works so well with a single Amy in any other version.
No. This is like the exception that proves the rule.
Yeah. Somehow she manages to take what is childish about young Amy and just slightly refine it in a way that you can see the same character being. She doesn't make this gigantic change. Like even the 94 version, right, where you have two different actors going from Kirsten Dunst to Samantha Mathis, suddenly she's incredibly refined and mature and like calm and collected. And this Amy is none of those things. But you can see how she's matured a little bit in a realistic manner, as would happen over the course of 4 or 5 years of being alive. Her relationship with Laurie is great. A lot of it is straight from the book, and it seems new and fresh because Greta Gerwig has chosen to feature scenes from the book that we don't see in many other versions. Like the part where she's like, "You disgust me." And they're actually having this like kind of fight in her art studio about her like wanting to marry Fred Vaughn. That's all from the book. I mean, she's updated the dialogue a little bit, but that's all from the book. but the performances are so fresh that it seems really new and like something we haven't seen before.
I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
God, I wish I actually had more to say. This is one of those things where I feel really bad because I want to sound smarter than I feel in the moment. Because in this moment, I don't feel very smart. Because the best thing that I can say is Florence Pugh. She's very good.
Yeah,
she's very good. She's a good actor. Acting times. Her acting times were a 10.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is another example, like, you know, she's bratty little Amy for a long time. And the relationship between her and Joe is so interesting because the two of them are so jealous of each other. Amy clearly thinks Joe always gets everything she wants, and Joe thinks Amy always gets everything she wants. And when Amy finally gets Lori and she has a conversation with Joe about it, you can, when she goes up to Joe and she's like, are you upset with me? Like, that is genuine. She's not gloating over having gotten Lori or gotten the thing that she wants or finally triumphed over Joe. She loves her sister. Like, she's a lot and she's got a lot of personality, but she doesn't want Joe to be upset. And Joe is upset. She's very upset, but she works really hard at trying not to show it to Amy. She shows it to her mother a little bit.
That was like the most emotional I got during the movie.
Yeah, where she kind of looks over Amy's shoulder at Marmee.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
When Amy is like, when Joe says, yes, I'm so happy for you, and Amy like melts.
Yeah.
And she's just like, oh, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
That moment got me.
Yeah.
That I shed a couple of tears during that scene.
Of course you did.
That got me. And the rest of the movie didn't, but like this moment really got me.
Yeah.
Florence Pugh is a revelation.
Yeah.
She's incredible, and I think it's so good. Can I talk about my theory for a second?
Sure.
I feel like sometimes you have a band. This is going to be a little weird, and I apologize, but try to go with me.
Okay.
Sometimes you have a band that is full of virtuosos, all trying to do their own thing. And you could look at any individual of them and on paper and say, well, this guitarist is incredibly good, and this bassist is incredibly good, and this drummer is like the best I've ever heard. So they must be a really good band. But sometimes that doesn't work, because sometimes what ends up happening is they're all fighting for the spotlight, and the whole thing tends to suffer. Whereas sometimes you have a band where everything really gels, and yes, maybe like a number of the people in the band aren't individually like virtuoso performances, but they can come together to make a piece of music or a performance that is greater than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that for me is what helped me crystallize my feelings about this movie. I think that so many individual parts of this movie are so good, but they're good in different ways that are pulling away from each other, that the whole thing didn't come together to gel for me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is me. This is just me. I'm not speaking for you. I'm certainly not speaking for anyone else. For me, if this was a movie that really tried to explore the motivations and maturity and growth of each of the sisters with the same care that it gave to Amy, and to a lesser extent Joe, and not really, I think, in anywhere close for Meg or Beth, I would have loved that movie.
Yeah.
If it was a movie that really, really leaned into Saoirse Ronan's performance as Joe as a writer, and maybe didn't have an Amy that got quite as much detailed singular development, I think I would have liked that version more. But for me, I was left with something that was trying to do both, and I feel like they were pulling against each other, and I can't fault it because both of those things are so good.
Yeah.
But they didn't gel for me.
Like I rarely say this, but I almost wish this had been a miniseries.
Yes.
And we could have spent more time with each of these characters.
So that was number 3 on our list. I'm so glad we watched it.
Yeah, me too.
I really enjoyed it. And I guess this is the thing we didn't expect.
Yeah.
Because there was also another one that came out since we recorded our first episode. There was a PBS miniseries in 2017. Going into this whole thing, I didn't expect this one to rank higher than the 2019 movie.
I mean, this was sort of opposite of the 2019 movie for me, because the 2019 movie, I was going in expecting to really fall in love with, and I liked it a lot, but I didn't fall head over heels for it. This one I thought was bad. Like, I think I had seen a preview and went, oh, that looks really bad.
Like, I love Angela Lansbury.
It looks really boring. Like, it looks like they didn't do a good job. I don't know who any of these actors are. I don't like this. So I went in with really low expectations. This is the Masterpiece Theater PBS miniseries. So you know how I said a few minutes ago that sometimes you wish someone would just do the book really, really well. And sometimes you want something that's a little more experimental, and sometimes you just want the book. This is someone doing the book Little Women really, really well.
I agree with that. I mean, I'll just spoil something. Obviously, the 1994 one is going to end up being our number one. It's not like we're going to say...
It's pretty obvious since we have not talked about it.
Big surprise. We hated it so much it didn't even place on the list.
Yeah.
Like, we did the 1918 silent one that no one can find because it's a lost movie. Like, 2017 and 1984, I think, have that in common, where they are very much like a straightforward adaptation. But as you say, I think this is more.
Yeah. Because it's a mini-series length, so they had a little bit more room to breathe and go into the different characters. Do you want to talk about them sort of character by character?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Well, actually, super quickly, can I just throw out like who created this?
Yeah, of course.
So it was directed by Vanessa Caswell, but it was written by Heidi Thomas, who has done a number of different things, including she wrote and produced the revival of Upstairs Downstairs
which
from
is
like
pretty good.
2010. She also is the creator of the show Call the Midwife.
Meg's pregnancy with twins, brought to you by the creator of Call the Midwife.
Is there another show? Because I don't think Call the Midwife has come up on this show very much before.
We have talked about Call the Midwife in almost every episode.
I don't know. For some reason, it didn't feel that way to me.
I
like
disagree.
All About Eve and Fiddler on the Roof, yes. Call the Midwife, I didn't think so.
Yeah.
But just so everyone who has not heard you say this before, would you say that there is a single show that makes you cry more consistently than Call the Midwife?
No. I cry every single time with every single birth on Call the Midwife. Remember, we were on an airplane one time and I was like, oh, this is so great. They have episode 1 of season 8. I haven't seen this yet. And like 35 minutes later, I turned to I tapped you on the shoulder and I just had tears streaming down my face. And I was just like, he loves her so much. You cry more at things on airplanes because your oxygen levels are low or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly why you were crying that much.
Yeah.
And I don't see you cry at things very often.
I was crying so much.
I feel like there is a thing that Heidi Thomas does that is, it feels effortless when I see her do it. Because I've seen a little bit of Call the Midwife and I saw this. I just feel like she is the kind of writer that is incredibly talented at being able to find the experiences in her life that will cut straight to a genuine emotion in like me, the audience. She will make a decision that I wasn't necessarily expecting, or just a little moment between characters, or she will put like one line of dialogue in the mouth of like Marmee or something like that that feels very experienced. It really feels like she has gone through these things in her life. And it feels really effortless. It doesn't feel like she's trying hard to hit me over the head with anything. I just feel like she's saying, no, I have experiences to write from and I'm going to write from those experiences. And you know what? It's going to destroy you.
Yeah.
It's going to wreck you.
Yeah. I mean, can I give an example?
Please.
So you know how we were talking about the Greta Gerwig movie? She had a story she wanted to tell about Amy. In this version, more than any other version, I felt like the writer had a story she wanted to tell about Marmee. And she created Call the Midwife, so we know she's interested in stories about mothers. Because the story about Meg becoming a mother was actually really beautiful in this as well. But we see a lot of Marmee in this one. Like, we see a lot of Marmee not through the eyes of other characters. Like, we see what happens when she gets angry and leaves the room and she has to go somewhere else and compose herself. Like, usually we just see her leave the room. In this case, we follow her out of the room. It's just heartbreaking, the scene where Beth sort of has to break the news to Marmee, like, I know that I'm very sick and I know that I'm dying and I'm not getting better. And Marmee just like runs out of the room and the camera follows her and then Joe follows her and she is just destroyed, because I think she already knew this information, but like having been told it is has completely destroyed her. And she's played by Emily Watson very, very well. I thought felt really like good performance.
Super, super understated. So understated that like I didn't actually think she was very good for like the first half of all of this.
Yes. And in fact, at one point I wrote down, I think they're trying to make this Marmee story, but like I'm not really sold on Emily Watson, but I was completely sold on her by the end.
Yeah.
And she is bereft and sobbing and says to Joe, among other heartbreaking things, I'm going to cry. Like, I don't know if I can say this without crying. She says, she won't need me anymore. She's going somewhere that she won't need me and I can't follow her and I won't be her mother anymore. And A, that's a heartbreaking thing to say. B, it is identical to the line in The Fault in Our Stars.
Yeah.
where Hazel overhears her mother sobbing and saying she's going to die and I won't be her mother anymore. Which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, John Green actually interviewed parents of children who either were sick or had passed away. And that was a sentiment that they had. Like, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
So I firmly believe this is not like cribbed from Fault in Our Stars. Like, I believe she could have come up with that independently. But in none of these versions do you really, like, you see that Marmee is, of course, sad.
Yeah.
But you don't see Marmee's utter heartbreak at the knowledge that her child is dying, and more than in this one. It's really gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
I think Emily Watson's really good in this.
Well, I mean, I think you're doing a good thing in it right now because you're getting us to the characters.
Yeah.
I think Marmee is this, she's very understated, and then suddenly she's the best character in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start kind of like the opposite direction? Let's start with like the minor characters and move our way like up to the main characters.
Sure.
Cool. So let's start with, like some of the men. Let's get them out of the way.
Okay.
Laurie and John. Laurie is Jonah Hauer-King, and John Brooke is Julian Morris in this.
They're both fine and great.
Fine and great.
Fine and great.
Fine and great and do a good job.
Both cute.
I don't know if they're the best John and Laurie, but they're both very, very good, and they serve the story very well. This one, I feel like they made a decision when they were making this one to show Laurie hearing the letters that Joe was sending back from New York where she mentions Professor Bear, and we get to see him as a character reacting to those.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't yet figured out all of his shit with Amy, but you can see how he feels after his proposal.
Yeah.
And I liked seeing what all the characters are feeling. Not that it needs to be a story about men, but there are characters in it, and I want to know how they're feeling. John, he was really good. We got to see him go off to war in this one.
We got to see him go to army. Well, we got to see him get wounded. I don't think we've seen that in any other version. But in the book, there's like one sentence talking about John's experience in the army, which is basically like Mr. Brooke went off to war, served for 18 months, did his duty, got wounded, and got sent home. And it's just so brushed over that you don't think, oh my God, he's wounded. Like, Meg must have been terrified. Like, that must have been awful. Like, to the same extent that Father March being wounded and or ill was this huge disruption. Like, John was also wounded. Yeah. And we see Meg like get the telegram and run to her mother, and need her help. Like, we see that scene and what that would have been like. And I love that they left that in there.
That was really good. How about Mr. March? I mean, Dylan Baker, I've seen him play amazing characters and the biggest creeps you could ever imagine. I loved him in this.
He was really funny. He was so funny. He reminded me a little bit of Mr. Bennett, actually, because he's sort of always in his library and women just come to him when they need things.
I loved the relationship between him and Joe in this one.
Yeah.
Not because they have this amazing relationship. Like, I actually felt like she was always kind of operating at a more emotionally intelligent level than he was.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like he was there for her emotionally the way she really needed.
Yeah.
But he still loved her and he was trying.
Yeah, his head was in the clouds.
Trying.
Yeah.
But that was like, I feel like that's a tough thing to play, and I think he played it really well, and I liked this version of the character. Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Yeah, Chris Cooper is amazing, but you know what? So is Michael Gambon. It's Michael Gambon.
He's not as lovable as Chris Cooper. I didn't feel.
No, but I felt like Michael Gambon did a pretty beautiful bridge of kind of the worst versions we've seen of the character. Kind of in opposite directions, because we've seen some versions of the character that are way too nice and way too feeling.
Yeah.
And we've seen some versions of the character who are way too standoffish and way too mean. And I thought Michael Gambon did a really, really faithful version of the character from the book who sat in the middle of that spectrum.
Yeah.
I felt like Chris Cooper was playing a different character. He was playing like they weren't trying to do like the book Mr. Lawrence in that one. And I think that's okay because Mr. Lawrence is not a main character. Yeah. That's fine.
Do whatever you want.
On paper, they're very similar, but Chris Cooper really brought something else to it. But Michael Gambon is like, he is my favorite more book accurate version of the character.
Yeah.
I loved him in it. The first scene where he like comes storming into the room to yell at Beth when she's playing the piano, and he has to then bring himself back and comfort her because she is clearly freaking the fuck out, was masterful.
Yeah.
Like, I loved that scene. That was one of my favorites in the entire miniseries. I loved Michael Gambon in this. Mark Stanley as Professor Bear. Just adorable.
So, you know how a few minutes ago I was like, I mean, Timothée Chalamet, like, yeah, I mean, whatever. He's he's cute and wee is like so not my type. This man did it for me. This man is a husky bearded man, and I enjoyed him.
Just a husky, lovable bearded man.
He was adorable. I really liked him.
And what does this version do that we saw in the Greta Gerwig one, but we watched this one first. So up until now, you'd never seen it before.
Oh, so this did something. So we watched this before the Greta Gerwig version. I had never seen the epilogue filmed before. And the epilogue is like 5 years after the end of the book, 5 years after they've gotten married. So Bear and Joe have 2 little boys, and Meg's kids are a little bit older, and Amy has a little girl, and they're all sitting at Plumfield with all the kids from the school running around, picking apples and celebrating Marmie's 60th birthday. And when he came in carrying those 2 little boys, I flipped out. It was the cutest thing I've ever seen. It was so cute. I loved the ending of this one.
Mm-hmm. And he was not a super main character in this. Like, they did it the traditional way where he doesn't show up until the end, and I thought it worked.
Yeah.
Like, it worked as far as an adaptation of the book goes.
Yeah.
It wasn't trying to do something different. It was just trying to do that really, really well. But we got to talk about the women.
Yes.
Where do you want to start?
Let's go from kind of smallest role to biggest role.
So we have to talk about Angela Lansbury.
Well, no, first we have to talk about Hannah.
Oh, right. Okay.
I don't know what it is about the character Hannah, their maid, or housekeeper, that like inspires comedy in people. But Hannah is so funny in many of these adaptations, and she's hilarious in this one. They filmed it in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an Irish actress. And she just has some of the funniest lines in the whole thing. Like, there's something about going out in pursuit of additional onions that we thought was really, really funny. And they just gave Hannah some great lines. She's not just like some random person in the background. They really like brought her to life in this. And she's one of my favorite Hannahs, I think.
I felt like the writing in this one was super sharp. I felt like Hannah got the funniest dialogue in this one.
Yeah.
Maybe she got the funniest bits of business in 2019.
Yeah.
Like with the shoes.
With the shoes. Yeah. Yeah.
But Hannah was very funny in this one.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Angela Lansbury.
Great.
She's great. How many days do you think she shot for?
Oh, like she's in the same costume the whole time. So probably like a day.
Like the same location.
Yeah.
I bet she was there for 2 days.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say that is specifically about her performance?
In both this version and the 2019 version, I really liked how they played up the sort of special relationship that Amy has with Aunt March, or that she develops with Aunt March. The Aunt March doesn't really care for Joe, even though Joe is her like assigned companion.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really special. This version was true to the book in that Amy goes to Europe with Aunt Carol, not Aunt March. This Aunt March is a little frail to be traipsing around Europe.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the other versions make it Aunt March as her traveling companion to give Aunt March a little more screen time. They didn't have that problem in this one because she was on set, as you say, clearly for 2 days. But no, she was great.
Angela Lansbury's she's a fucking presence. This is one of the times I was talking about it. I wonder how many times, I never actually did any research, how many times have Angela Lansbury and Meryl Streep played the same part? Because this is the second one, because they did The Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah. Maybe just the 2.
Like decades apart.
Yeah.
And this one like 2 years. But it's fun to watch them both do it because they're both just doing them. They're doing like, I feel like that's the thing about Aunt March. I don't know that there is like a book version of Aunt March that some chameleon is going to step into the role and do that version of it. I feel like if you hire Greer Garson, you're going to get Greer Garson. And if you hire Angela Lansbury, you're going to get Angela Lansbury. And if you hire Meryl Streep, to your point before, she's not a chameleon. She's Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
Like every time. You're going to get that worse. So I feel like Angela Lansbury was kind of inspired casting if you could only get someone for a couple of days.
She was great. I kind of want to talk about Amy and Meg together, maybe. Neither of them had their stories emphasized that much. They were both very traditional. Amy, traditional Meg, although I did like a little bit more of Meg's home life. We saw her pregnancy. We saw her sort of realistically sized twin pregnancy. She was just huge, and they were like really worried about her.
Yeah.
As you would be.
We were super worried about how the birth was going to go.
Yeah, we thought it was going to be...
Given the pedigree of the show.
We thought it was going to be graphic, and you don't really see it, but it is actually the most... Of all of the Megs, you do kind of see her in bed afterwards, and like you see her back, like that Marmie's kind of like been bathing her or helping her. And you sort of see the exhaustion on her face that she's just given birth to twins without anesthetic. I want to talk about birth for a second.
Okay.
I have a new appreciation of long ago people. And every time I see like an old picture or an old painting of like a woman with her children, you know, before the mid 20th century, I just think like, I don't know what they made them out of then. They were stronger. How many contractions did I have before I was yelling for the epidural? It was like 10 minutes.
Something like that.
It was really not very many.
And to be fair, too, there's a bit of a survivorship bias going on here as well.
Yeah.
Because
I would not have been one of the ones that survived.
Yeah.
I would just laid down and died.
the odds were not always in everyone's favor.
Yeah.
But I think this is my favorite birth from all of them, just because it was the most realistic
Yeah.
without being graphic.
Yeah.
I just want to go back for a second because you kind of lump Amy and Meg together. I think it's important to talk about two things really quickly. One, Catherine Newton as Amy, I'm not going to say that she's as amazing as Florence Pugh is. I won't do that. But I will say, if it wasn't for Florence Pugh, I would say that Catherine Newton is actually my favorite version of the character where it's the same actress at both ages.
I thought she did a great job. I literally wrote down, and this is before we had seen the 2019 one, but I wrote down Amy is less stunted than usual.
Yeah, they made a really smart choice to not make her like super, super, super immature.
Yeah.
And also when she quote unquote matures, she's also not like too mature at that point.
Right.
I think they did a really good job of it. So I think she deserves some props.
Yeah, it's a fine line, and I think they did a good job.
There was 2 years where she was, I think, the best Amy March that had been put on film as one person.
Yeah.
But then 2019 happened.
Yeah.
But when you talk about Meg, one of my favorite Meg scenes of all of them was in this one.
Okay.
It was the scene where Aunt March shows up at their house to say, I heard that you are going to marry this guy and I will not have it.
Yes.
That scene was fantastic.
It was
because
really good.
That was the scene where this Meg got to stand up to Aunt March for the very first time. Because isn't this the one where like he hasn't even asked her? So like to set the scene, Aunt March is there, Meg is there, John is there, the three of them in the room together, and Meg goes off on Aunt March. And does she basically like kind of propose to him in that scene?
Yeah. She's like, I'm going to marry him. And he's like, oh, that sounds great.
I hadn't asked you yet.
Yeah.
I wanted to.
Uh-huh.
I'm very happy. I thought that was great. I thought this was a Meg that set herself apart. She wasn't just like boilerplate Meg.
Yeah.
I really liked her character.
She wasn't just standing around waiting for things to happen to her. She was like, I want to be married and I want to have children and I'm going to go and get those things. They did change around the plot in a way related to both Amy and Meg that I didn't love. I just want to talk about this really quickly. They were just trying to get things done, right? They were just trying to like get through some plot. And Marmee goes to Washington for her injured husband or sick husband in this much earlier, I think, than in the book or in many of the other versions.
I think in this one he's sick.
Yeah, he's sick. Because of that, both Meg going to the fancy party and like getting her head turned with all the glitz and glamour,
Right.
and Amy's punishment at school for bringing the limes, both of those things end up happening while Marmee is away. And I didn't love it, and I guess I understand why they did it. They're really just trying to compress events, but both of those are like examples of the girls needing their mother to help them with something, and in this case she was away. So Amy comes home and Joe is raging and angry and upset, and I was like, yeah, but what's the resolution of this going to be? Joe doesn't have the authority to pull Amy out of school. Like, Joe's not Amy's mother, so how are they going to resolve this? And it wasn't really stated how it ended up being resolved.
Well, no, I mean, you say she didn't have the authority, but in this version Joe had the authority to say you don't have to go back to school.
But she didn't say that. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, they just kind of left it.
Didn't she say you're not going back to that place? I thought Joe actually made that comment, and then that was when you said to me she doesn't have the authority to say that.
Maybe. It was not clear that she was not speaking out of anger. Like, I don't think.
I'm not saying that to talk against your greater point, because I think your greater point stands.
Yeah. And then once Marmee's back, at one point she says to Joe, yes, Meg came to me and told me all about the party. I wish you had come to me and confided in me as well. But like, it just didn't have the same impact for me as it happening right away.
Yeah.
But it's a minor point. Do you want to talk about Beth?
I would love to talk about Beth.
Okay.
Full disclosure, I don't know how to pronounce her name. It is Annes. I don't know if that's Anne's, Annis. I am not sure. Miss Elway, I think as an actress, I think she's very good. I don't know that she stands out in particular, but she did a very, very good job. As written, this is my favorite version of Beth's story from all of the 10 versions that we watched.
Mm-hmm.
I think she got a level of characterization that I was really looking for. I think, like, honestly, in terms of the character motivation that she got, I would say it was equal to Amy in the Greta Gerwig version, but they were in different versions.
Yeah.
And it was weird to see. But I loved it. Can I give an example of this?
Yes.
So I guess it's always implied that Beth is kind of an introvert.
Yeah.
This is the only one I've seen where we are actually given somewhat of a view into Beth's head whenever she is leaving the house to go into the world. And it looks terrifying and painful. My heart went out to her in a way that I hadn't seen before. I cried more at this version than any other one. I fucking loved Beth in this version, and I was just so invested in her storyline and her reaching outside of herself and breaking outside of it and forming a relationship with Mr. Lawrence and getting outside the house. Every time she talked to a character who wasn't in her family, I felt like it was a victory. I loved her.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like sometimes Beth is portrayed as like she's just a shy homebody, but that is a perfectly fine and acceptable way to be. And in this, it was more like she was introverted and shy and almost agoraphobic, like to the point of being troubled.
Yeah.
And she has a conversation with Marmee at one point where Marmee is like, you have to try harder. This is not okay. You know, she said something like, I pulled you out of school because it troubled your spirit. And that was okay. But like, you got to do a little better with your shyness. And Beth is like, yes, you're right. Like, I want Father to be proud of me or whatever. Because even in the book, it's like, oh, the three girls are really trying to conquer their faults, but Beth is perfect, which I think is Louisa May Alcott seeing her dead sister in a little bit too kind of a light.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect. And in this case, I think they really tried to make her not just like an angel in the corner.
Yeah, I feel like so many versions have some, I can't remember which version exactly had these words, but I feel like a lot of them paraphrase it, where one of the characters says, like, Beth was the best of us, like, after she's passed away. And I don't always see that.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's always borne out in the text. But in this one, I fucking loved her. I thought she was great. Remember the conversation she had at quote unquote Walden Pond? That's like clearly a very, very large lake in Ireland.
Yes.
It looks nothing like Walden Pond.
Like Walden Pond. Walden Pond doesn't have mountains surrounding it.
But like Beth got to talk to that one other character we never see again.
Yeah.
Who is like
he hurt his leg.
Yeah.
He's disabled now.
Right. Like they're British boys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They have their one friend that can't come out boating with them, and Beth won't do it, and the two of them get to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And she just gets to talk to a person that isn't one of the main characters, and it was really refreshing, and I thought she was good. And her death scene was surrounded by family with Marmee in the bed with her. I mean, you mentioned before the scene that Emily Watson got about her dying.
Yeah. And then she got this scene too where they're all kind of looking at each other, and it's Marmee and Joe, and I can't remember if Meg is there or not. I think she might be, and their dad, and they're just all looking at each other like, okay, it's happening.
Yeah, like Amy was the only one who wasn't there.
Yeah, and then Marmee, as you say, she like gets in the bed with her, and she gives her this little speech, like essentially like it's okay to let go, like we'll be here until you're ready to go, and it's just heartbreaking. Like again, like it's a lot of it is about Marmee and what she's going through, but also, you know, what Beth is going through as well. Yeah, she's great.
Want to talk about Joe?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Maya Hawke.
I really liked her. I feel like she fell a little bit on the modern. I think she felt a little modern to me. But that was partly the dialogue. And partly the way that she was costumed. Oh, by the way, I just saw a YouTube video that completely cemented all of my weird feelings about how modern, not only this version, but the 2019 version. It was Bernadette Banner, who's a really popular costume YouTuber and does like amazing historical costumes. But she talked really briefly about the 2019 Little Women, and this one has the same problem too. And I hadn't spotted this exact thing. There's no bonnets in either of these. Everyone just has their hair, like, even if their hair is up, it's kind of like a messy bun, but also nobody wears hats or bonnets. And I think that's why it felt so weirdly modern. I think that's why Emma Watson's like head felt so modern to me, because she never wore a bonnet, and Meg of course would be very proper and wear a bonnet.
I would think so.
Yeah. And it something just clicked into place when I saw that. I was like, yes, that's exactly right.
Like when I say I would think so, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
I don't know as much about that part.
So anyway, the way that Jo was costumed in this sort of had the same problem. But you had said to me something funny about Maya Hawke before. You were like, I've never seen someone look exactly like both of their parents at the same time.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. And then there was this one shot where she was like facing one way, and then she turned her head, and I was like, yep, I just saw Uma Thurman, and she turned her face, and I saw Ethan Hawke. That was it. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you talk about how modern she felt. I don't know that she was born to play this role.
Yeah.
I thought she was very good. It was one of those things where moment to moment, I may be thinking to myself, I don't know, maybe they could have found someone better for the part. And then upon reflection, when we reached the end, I realized, actually, she ended up carrying 3 hours of movie. She was better than I thought moment to moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think she did a really, really admirable job. But I will also say, it was weird for me coming into this to see her do something kind of period, because the only other thing that I had seen her done was Stranger Things season 3.
There you go.
Which I know you haven't watched.
Yeah.
More modern a performance you couldn't find.
Yeah.
That was a role I think she's born to play. And this was fun seeing her in it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know that she stood out, but I thought she did a really, really admirable job.
Yeah,
with it.
and she fit into the family really well. Like, I
Yeah.
just thought they did a good job casting this family. They felt like a family. I think they felt like sisters even more than the 2019 version for me.
Well, this is the thing I was talking about, where I don't know that any single performance was incredibly standout. I don't know that any of them were like virtuoso performances, but there was something about the way they gelled as an ensemble that I didn't see in 2019.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the big reasons why I personally found this one more enjoyable.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it was the script and the ensemble I think really did it for me. This
Yeah.
one was more entertaining, more unique, funnier than I thought it would be, more heartbreaking than I thought it would be. And just, it also had a point of view.
Yeah. Well, it reminded both of us, we were talking about this while we were watching. It felt a little bit like Anne with an E, just because of the sort of more modern dialogue. And it also felt, we didn't talk about this, but I think you'll agree, it also felt a lot like the Ruth Wilson Jane Eyre. Like it wasn't like so book accurate in terms of the dialogue necessarily, but the characters felt really, really real.
Yeah.
And I think both of those come from kind of a similar style of adaptation, and I think this falls really nicely into that as well.
Yeah, I think it was a really good match of writer and material.
Yeah.
We're gonna watch it again at some point. This is something that'll be on rotation in this house.
Yeah, I could have finished it and like just turned around and watched it again, which is high praise coming from me. I'm usually pretty bored by the end of something. Should we move on to number one?
Number one.
I can close my notebook. I do not have any new notes on this one.
Surprise, surprise. 1994's Little Women, directed by Gillian Armstrong, written by Robin Swycord, produced by Denise DeNovi.
It's amazing what happens when women are in charge of things.
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting thing. Robin Swycord and Denise DeNovi, they produced another movie. Do you know what else they produced?
Yes.
What is that?
2019 Little Women.
Yeah, they care about Little Women. This is big for them.
Maybe they like held some rights or something that they had to put them on as producers?
Maybe.
It could be.
Here's the deal. I would be totally willing to accept either that they were just producer in name only, or that they actually were involved in some way. Because I do know that this wasn't something that was a Greta Gerwig passion project.
Right.
This was something that had been in development for a number of years. And Greta Gerwig was not the first person attached to it. She heard that it was in development and that they were having trouble keeping a director. And I guess they were always looking at women writers and women directors. So I know that, I'm pretty sure that Swycord and DeNovi were on earlier.
Gotcha.
And I guess she went to her agent and said, I want this.
Yeah. I
love Little Women. I want to do this. Get me this. That's my understanding of it. So Robin Swycord, Denise DeNovi. What can we say that, like, literally, what can we say that we didn't say in the first episode about why this one is so good? Do we do the shitty thing and say it's the best one, it's our favorite, and leave it there?
I mean, we might have to, because we said a lot about it in the first one. We talked a lot about it in our wrap-up episode for that year when we were going through like this made it to our like top 5 favorite adaptations of all time. So similar to the 95 Pride and Prejudice, what is there to say that has not already been said? We love this version. It is an extremely loving adaptation. like just the set is a labor of love. Like when we went to Orchard House, we felt like we were standing in the movie.
Yeah.
Like the real Orchard House, they did such a good job recreating that.
Well, you bring up Orchard House. Going back to 2019, the exterior of the March House in 2019 is like a carbon copy of Orchard House.
Yeah.
The inside, though, 1994 is like a carbon copy.
Yeah.
It really feels like you're walking around inside that house.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I'm just remembering back to some of the points we made in the first episode that I think are worth repeating right here. One of the things that we keep saying with a lot of these is that the dialogue felt very modern.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I think you definitely can't say about this one.
No.
I think the dialogue feels so period accurate. And one of the things that I love about it was the fact that Robin Swycord, she'd been working on this script for years. I actually think of all the people who are listed as creators for all the versions we watched, I think Robin Swycord is probably the one I would want to sit down with the most to talk about Little Women with.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the last 30 years of this story being told, I think really owes a debt to her, because this was a labor of love for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she really set the tone for how much real life you could incorporate into the story.
Yeah.
How much of the Alcotts could you incorporate in?
Yeah.
Like, she made a point of reading as many original letters as she could that the Alcotts had written to each other,
Mm-hmm.
so that she could figure out what the rhythm of the dialogue would be.
Yeah.
Because she knew she couldn't look at the dialogue in the book to figure out how people talked, but she could look at letters from the time to figure out how people talked.
Yeah. And I think that's right. Like, I think that's the mistake that some of the earlier adaptations made, is they went straight to the book, which is stylized dialogue. People didn't necessarily actually talk like that. And then, you might have a version that leans a little too hard into modern dialogue, and then it sounds dated because it's from the 70s. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, like, she actually, it sounds like natural dialogue from a time period, because people were still just people and they talked in a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cast. And again, I'm just remembering little bits and pieces that we mentioned in the first one. I think there's amazing things you can do when you cast certain people that signify who the character is to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you are going to cast a Marmee who is like Abba Alcott, someone who's very progressive and very, like, in her mind, very politically active, casting Susan Sarandon is really smart, because you're not just getting a really good actor, you're getting someone that the audience looks at and immediately gets the sense of, oh, this is a progressive person.
Yeah, it's like shorthand.
Yeah. I thought it was really brilliant. I thought that was brilliant casting.
Yeah, and now, again, like we talked about this a little bit in the other episode, but now having watched even more versions of Little Women, I cannot think of a version of Little Women or almost anything where people cast as sisters felt more like sisters. And one of the things that they did, and by far not the only thing that they did, but one of the things that they did was they cast them in order of age. So they're not jumping around in ages, and they're not just all like four people in their mid-20s who might look a little bit older, a little bit younger. Like, they cast them in the right order of age. So Amy is the youngest, then Beth, then Joe, then Meg. And whatever they did to foster a spirit of sisterhood among these four actresses and Samantha Mathis was brilliant. I can't think of a better cast family that just makes you think, yes, this is a family. These people are related. They love each other. There's sort of this shorthand of like, yeah, that's how sisters talk to each other.
Yeah.
They have sort of a shared vocabulary and shared experiences. I was playing D&D with my brothers the other night, and it's just like, yeah, we're making all these references to all of these things that, like, yeah, a given person might know some of them, but we know that we're going to know all of these things because it's stuff that we grew up with.
Yeah. I think the more I think about it, the more the thing that stands out for me for why this movie is so good and so successful is that it makes such smart and economical choices about action and reaction between the actors to build those relationships. So one thing I'll talk about, let's talk about Beth's death scene.
Okay.
In the PBS miniseries, we have 3 hours to spend with these characters, and what the creators chose to do when they staged Beth's death scene is we're going to have the whole family there. It's going to be a tableau. We've been spending our entire time building up all of these characters and establishing them all as individual characters with individual arcs and individual thoughts and feelings, because we have all this time to do it. And because that was the thing that was important to us. So when Beth dies, we're going to show them all there, and you're able to look at every single character, and you're able to figure out what is their reaction to what's happening in front of them. In this version, we get something that is maybe not as good from the standpoint of showing reactions to all the characters, but they created something emotionally specific and really, really simple and expressive, which is that the death happens off camera and the only other person in the room is Joe. I think it's the best scene in the movie. Like, the more we watch it, every single time, that one scene is the one where whatever I'm doing, I have to stop what I'm doing and look at it, because I think it is just kind of a masterclass in
visual filmmaking and staging
without dialogue, because they make so many different staging choices, and so everything the camera does, everything the editing is doing, everything the music is doing works perfectly to make you feel what's happening without thinking about it intellectually. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, maybe it would make more sense if other people were in the room. Maybe it would make more sense if we immediately saw what the reactions of all the rest of the family would be. But they've made really smart choices throughout the movie to show what the relationships are. We can make the assumption that Marmee is sad. We don't necessarily see what her reaction is right afterwards. But we get Joe going to the window, Beth is still alive, and when she turns around, we can see in her face that Beth is gone. And then we cut to that scene of Hannah cleaning up the room with no one in the bed, and she has that moment of spreading petals around the room and touching the hand of the doll.
Yeah.
And that is visual storytelling that does not depend on any dialogue. And I don't think I've seen a level of simple, no dialogue action in any other version of the story. And I think that's what sets this one apart for me. The filmmaking is so confident that it doesn't always feel like it needs to fall back on the normal things that, like, I think I as a filmmaker would probably retreat to. Dialogue. Because if you want to show how a character is feeling, the easiest way to do that is to make them say how they're feeling.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that this scene does that you just described so beautifully, what is that it's kind of paired with a scene earlier in the movie where Beth is really sick. Marmee comes home, Joe falls asleep, and she wakes up and no one's in the bed. And she freaks out and she runs downstairs, and Beth is sitting up, eating breakfast with Hannah and Marmee, like she's feeling better. And so you get this, and for a second you see the empty bed and you're like, oh, maybe the same thing happened again, but of course it didn't. Like, that she died.
Yeah.
But you sort of have these two scenes mirroring each other.
Yeah. I think I want to end on that. Like, to me, this is confident filmmaking. This is filmmaking that is done by people who knew exactly what they were trying to do, and they knew they could execute things through action, through staging, through music, and when needed, through dialogue. But they didn't rely on just one thing. I just think this is a perfect movie.
Yeah.
It really is beautiful. And we could talk about, like, how good Gabriel Byrne is as Professor Bear, and Eric Stoltz and Christian Bale. Like, everyone's great. Mary Wicks is amazing as Aunt March.
Winona Ryder. Like, we haven't even named them. Like,
we keep talking about, like, versions of Amy that show the progression of age. It still blows my mind how amazing Winona Ryder was at being both 15 and 20.
Yeah, and Trini Alvarado too. Like, she is in her mid-20s, but like she actually does seem a lot younger at the beginning of the movie than at the end. Claire Danes obviously doesn't get to grow up, so it doesn't really matter. But but they do it with her too. Like, at the beginning of the movie, she's like in like two braids, like Anne of Green Gables, and she does age up a little bit.
Yeah.
I always think of that little anecdote that, like, the director felt really bad because she had made Claire Danes cry, and she was standing next to her mother because her mother was on set because she was only 17, and her mother was like, "Oh no, this is gonna be great in the movie."
Yeah, there's just a bunch of goddamn professionals doing confident filmmaking.
Yeah,
I love it. You good there?
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Do you want to do some quadrants?
Oh man, yeah.
All right, let's do this quickly.
Okay.
How about, I'm going to go chronologically for this one.
Yeah, I think you should.
1933, did they care about the source material?
I would not think so.
Did they do a successful job?
Yes.
Okay. 1949, did they care about the source material, which was the 1933 version?
They did not.
I think they only cared about the 1933 version. Were they successful? No. 1950, did they care about the source material?
Probably not. I would say probably not. Would be my guess.
Okay, was it successful?
It was not unsuccessful.
Yeah, kind of weirdly
right.
successful.
Yeah,
kind of fun.
On the line.
1970, did they care about the source material? Did the BBC care?
No.
Okay. Did they?
Of course not.
You sure?
I don't think they did.
They're just trying to get stuff out the door?
Yeah, like anything in the public domain.
Yeah. Was it successful?
It was okay.
If you're grading on a curve.
If you're grading on a curve, like, it's a solid C+.
Yeah. If you're grading on a curve of BBC productions before 1980.
Like, at least, like, the cardboard set didn't fall down.
Yeah, thank God for that.
You got to give it that. Because that's more than can be said for, like, upstairs, downstairs.
1980 anime special. Did they care about the source material?
No.
Okay. Did they do a good job?
No. I mean, ultimately.
1994. Did they care about the source material?
Yeah.
Was it successful?
Yes.
Okay. 2017 masterpiece miniseries. Did they care about the source material?
Undoubtedly.
Was it successful?
Yes.
2018.
Jeez, oh, Pete.
Did they care about the source material?
Weirdly, someone must have.
Someone must have. I don't think the people that distributed the movie gave a shit. Was it successful?
No.
Lord, no. Jesus, no.
Jesus, take the wheel. No.
2019, did they? I'm gonna say it. Did Greta Gerwig care about the source material?
Yes, she cared about Amy a lot.
Was it successful?
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Well, do you? It's weird to do a revisit and only do one episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be 10 hours long, but
we're doing
okay.
another Pride and Prejudice next week, though, right?
No.
No?
We're going to move on.
Well, that is a damn shame.
We're going to move on to something totally different.
Well.
And now for something completely different.
Well, this has been Adapt or Perish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AdaptCast. And if you tweet about the show, don't forget to use the AdaptCast hashtag. You can join our groups on Facebook and Goodreads, and you can also find and follow me on Letterboxd. If you have anything to say that's longer than a tweet, you can always send an email to adaptorperishcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, there are 2 great ways you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice would be greatly appreciated.
Hey, do you want to take a trip to Concord?
Concord? Where's Concord is in California, though, right?
Yeah,
That is
clearly.
too far away.
Too far away. Let's go to Concord.
Yes. Oh, it's so much closer.
And
It's so
very
much
pretty.
nicer,
It's
too.
got Walden Pond.
Oh, I love Concord.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.